Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Carmen Thomas. Carmen Thomas was born on October 30th, 1987 in South Africa. When she was just 10 years old, her father passed away. This tragic loss had a profound impact on her family, and they decided to Whitby, United Kingdom, to live with relatives. However, they did not find the peace they were seeking, and after some time, they returned to South Africa. Despite the challenges she faced, Carmen decided to stay with her relatives when she turned 18. She later moved to London, where she completed her studies and earned a master's degree in marketing. Carmen had a strong and charismatic personality that drew people to her. She was a loyal friend and companion to many, but living in a big city like London came with a high price tag. To maintain a decent standard of living, Carmen had to work hard. During the day, she worked as a marketer in a store, and in her free time, she worked part-time in a gentleman's club. Although her choice of part-time job may seem unusual, Carmen was a girl with strong values and never engaged in unnecessary or undignified behavior, which earned her the respect of her clients. In this place, she met Brad Callahan, a charming and flamboyant man. Born in New Zealand in April 1978, Brad's parents separated when he was 9 years old, and he stayed with his mother. They later moved to Australia in 2001. After graduating from university with an engineering degree in the construction industry, Brad was offered a job as chief structural engineer for a large business complex in the UK. To boost his professional image, Brad hired a gentleman's agency and met Carmen, a beautiful, intelligent, and tall woman with dark hair and bright eyes. Although they started with a casual arrangement, Brad and Carmen continued to communicate informally, which eventually turned into a strong friendship and later, love. Their romantic relationship blossomed quickly, and they soon moved in together. Their life was built on trust, care, and mutual support, making them look absolutely happy. Carmen became pregnant, and Brad thought it would be best for them to move back to New Zealand, where the air is clean and the pace of life is more relaxed. They returned to Auckland in March 2005. After their son Jack was born, he brought immense joy and happiness into their lives from day one. Carmen and Brad prioritized his safety and well-being, providing everything he needed for a happy childhood. To them, Jack was the center of their universe. However, with Jack's arrival, serious disagreements began to surface in their relationship. The first disagreements arose over how to raise their child. As a result, their relationship became rocky and unstable, ultimately leading to their breakup 3 years later. Despite the challenges, they shared joint custody of Jack and made a genuine effort to maintain a positive relationship for his sake. The breakup was difficult for both Carmen and Brad, but they put their differences aside to ensure little Jack's well-being. Carmen and Jack moved in with Colin, Carmen's half-brother, in Oakland, seeking emotional support and a sense of family. As time passed, Carmen regained her emotional balance and started rebuilding her life without Brad. In 2008, she decided to move to a house on a nearby street to Brad's so her young son could be closer to his father. Carmen, who had lost her own father at a young age, wanted to ensure her child would have a father figure in his life as much as possible. Carmen and Brad maintained a relationship for the sake of their son, but many people mistakenly thought they remained couple. In truth, they only communicated when necessary to support their child. As they went their separate ways, both Carmen and Brad concentrated on finding personal happiness. Brad continued his career as a construction engineer and eventually started a new relationship in May 2009, which led to an engagement. Carmen focused on raising their son while working at the gentleman's club, which upset Brad. He thought the mother of his child should not be involved in questionable activities. This disagreement created tension in their relationship, which worsened over time. Carmen issued ultimatums, but Brad ignored them. Despite this, Brad got married again and was expecting another child. His new financial responsibilities affected the alimony he paid Carmen for Jack's care. The money issue triggered a series of scandals. On March 19, 2010, neighbors called the police due to a domestic violence incident. Carmen was involved in a physical altercation with Brad during an argument and received a warning. Their relationship finally broke down. Even after separation, arguments continued. Each new question about Jack's care sparked aggression and conflict between the two former lovers. They couldn't agree on something as simple as which school Jack should attend, leading to more disputes. On June 29, 2010, Brad visited Carmen's house to finalize a written agreement for child support and discuss a new school for Jack. However, Carmen was unhappy with the document and refused to sign it. In a heated argument, she shouted that Jack was not Brad's son and told him to leave. Brad departed. 2 weeks passed without Brad contacting Carmen. Concerned for her safety, Brad reported Carmen Thomas missing to the police on July 13, 2010. The authorities took his report and launched an investigation. By analyzing video footage and interviewing neighbors, investigators were able to piece together a timeline of events leading up to Carmen's disappearance, uncovering crucial details that would aid in the search for her. On June 29th, a surveillance camera caught Carmen on tape at a nearby supermarket, not far from the house she shared with Jack. The police were alerted to the house when they noticed that there was no garbage can outside, which seemed unusual. Upon inspecting the house, they found traces of blood on the front door, washing machine, and shower. Forensic experts used luminol to detect blood evidence, which reacts with the iron in hemoglobin. The test revealed multiple patterns of bloodstains on the bathroom door and floor, confirming their suspicions. The landlady reported that on June 29th she heard loud screams, followed by prolonged crying and moaning. She went to Carmen's door, but no one answered. When she looked out the window, she saw a street trash can and an overturned drying rack on the ground. Alarmed, she called her husband. Before he arrived, Brad emerged from the house, holding dirty clothes. When he saw the landlady, he hastily explained that Carmen had undergone a medical procedure and had vomited blood. However, the landlady was suspicious, noting that Brad looked like he had just showered. Despite her doubts, she didn't call the police, as she had no reason to disbelieve Brad's story. The police investigation focused on Carmen's cell phone, which showed a steady stream of messages and calls. However, the tone and style of these communications didn't match Carmen's usual way of communicating. This sparked even more questions. Where did Carmen go for medical help, and why? Fortunately, the answers weren't far off. As the investigation continued, Carmen's car was discovered. In the back seat, her personal belongings, including luggage and clothes, were found. A closer look at the seized suitcase revealed bloodstains on some items. A note in the car revealed that Carmen owed money to her employer. A surprising discovery was made in the glove compartment, an envelope with Misty's name on it, containing $270. Police Inspector Mark Benefield suspected foul play after discovering bloodstains in Carmen's car. A search of the countryside southeast of Auckland was conducted, but Carmen's body was not found. The investigation continued, with detectives analyzing Carmen's and Brad's phone records. They made a surprising discovery. Both phones were in the same location throughout the search period, and Carmen's phone hadn't connected to a cell tower in Hamilton. A crucial piece of evidence was a missing trash can, which had vanished from its usual spot near the house on the day Carmen disappeared. A neighbor had seen it through her window. But why was it necessary for the trash can to be inside the house in the first place? The police investigated Brad's phone and financial records, which revealed some suspicious purchases on June 30th, including a meat cleaver, a large plastic container, and garbage bags. By examining Brad's daily routine, they found some unusual events that didn't fit his normal pattern. One day, he arrived at the construction site very early and spent a long time walking alone around the property. While this was unusual, it wasn't enough to raise concern among the workers who saw him. As the evidence mounted, including Carmen's phone and Brad's questionable purchases, he went from being a victim to a suspect. The police believed that Brad had killed Carmen by hitting her on the head multiple times and then hiding her body. On September 21st, Brad was arrested and charged with Carmen's murder and attempting to modify the course of justice. He pleaded not guilty and was scheduled for trial. In a surprising coincidence, Brad's second son was born to his new partner while he was in custody, causing a wave of emotion and resentment in the young father. 9 days after his arrest, Brad broke down and revealed to investigators where he had buried Carmen's body. Brad concocted a plan to make it seem like Carmen had left for Hamilton and never came back. Confident in his scheme, he was convinced he'd pulled it off. However, life had other plans. Under interrogation, Brad recounted the events of that fateful day. It began with a heated argument, which ended with Carmen kicking Brad out of the house and claiming Jack wasn't his son. Brad left, but 5 minutes later, he returned and struck Carmen on the head with a baseball bat, rendering her unconscious. The impact was severe, causing blood to gush from the wound and stain the floor bright red, accompanied by labored breathing. Standing over Carmen's lifeless body, Brad's eyes blazed with a wild, unhinged expression. He realized the gravity of his actions, but his anger and resentment towards Carmen's words clouded his judgment. In a fit of rage, he unleashed several more punches. Although aware of the irreparable consequences, his obsessive fury consumed him. Fleeting memories of happier times flashed before his eyes, but they were now forever lost. Brad knew his life would never be the same after that devastating moment, but he felt no remorse as he had eliminated his primary problem, and Jack was now exclusively his. After regaining consciousness, Brad took a shower and discreetly left Carmen's house. In the subsequent days, he took swift action to dispose of Carmen's body and conceal the evidence of the crime. He contacted his friend and arranged to meet him outside a supermarket, asking him to purchase 3 black garbage bags, kerosene, and cleaning supplies. Brad waited outside the store, trying to avoid raising suspicions. Once his friend had made the purchase, Brad returned to the apartment and began the cleanup process. He meticulously wiped away the blood spatter and then placed the body in a garbage bag, which he later discarded in a trash can. After Carmen's murdered, the defendant cut her body into 8 pieces to dispose of it. He severed her legs at the hip joints, then cut each leg into 2 pieces at the knee. He also severed her arms and head from her torso. On July 3rd, he confided in a friend at a boat ramp in Oahu Bay, Oakland, telling him that he had killed Carmen during an argument and needed help to get rid of the body. However, the friend refused to lend him a boat, and the attempt to dump the remains at sea failed. Over the next few days, the defendant drove to Wyrie Ridge in West Auckland and buried the body parts in a shallow grave. On July 7th, he drove Carmen's car to Hamilton and abandoned it in a hotel parking lot, leaving behind a suitcase of clothes and other personal belongings to make it seem like she had intentionally left. However, in his hurry, he failed to notice that the suitcase also contained bloody clothes. After disposing of the car, Brad attempted to create the illusion that Carmen was still alive by sending text messages from her cell phone to her friends. He pretended to be Carmen, claiming she was unwell and had been in poor health for days. However, Brad's plan ultimately failed. On October 1st, the police searched the burial site indicated by Brad and discovered Carmen's body. Her remains were found in plastic containers in a makeshift grave on Wyrie Ridge, and an autopsy revealed that she had died from multiple head injuries, including a fatal blow that caused a compressed skull fracture. After forensic examinations, Carmen's body was returned to her family for burial. A private funeral was held at Green Lane Christian Center on October 13th to honor Carmen, a young mother known for her cheerful, kind, and successful nature. Her son, little Jack, was only able to hug and kiss her white casket, having waited and hoped to see and hug his mother. The first court hearing for Carmen's case took place on February 8, 2011. Judge Venning found the crime to be unintentional, taking into account Brad's claim that he acted in a fit of rage. While Judge Venning acknowledged this, he was less lenient when it came to Brad's attempted cover-up. On May 26, 2011, Brad Callahan was charged with attempting to obstruct justice. According to the police investigation, on July 29, 2010, Callahan fatally struck Carmen Thomas multiple times in the head. He then sent a text message to a friend asking for 3 garbage bags and a bottle of kerosene. Subsequently, Callahan dismembered Carmen's body into 8 pieces to dispose of it. On November 25, 2011, a retrial was held, and police officers involved in the case filled the Auckland High Court. Unexpectedly, Brad Callahan pleaded guilty to 2 charges: murder and attempting to obstruct justice following Carmen's death. This was a reversal of his previous denial of guilt. The judge described Callahan's actions as one of the most serious cases of attempting to pervert the course of justice, stating it was as serious as it gets. The judge also characterized the murder of Carmen Thomas as brutal, but not severe enough to warrant the harshest sentencing laws. A 33-year-old man, Brad Callahan, was sentenced to life in prison for murdering Carmen Thomas in Auckland High Court. The court was packed with Carmen's friends and family, including her parents, who had traveled from South Africa. Judge Venning condemned Callahan's attempts to cover his tracks, describing them as insufficient to bring him to justice. Callahan will serve his life sentence and 6 years for attempting to pervert the course of justice concurrently. Detective Inspector Mark Benefield stated that Callahan's actions had a devastating impact on 2 families and that he had effectively passed judgment on himself. Callahan's supporters left the court without commenting. Carmen's family expressed their grief and anger over her tragic loss, grateful that Callahan will be imprisoned for a long time to reflect on the harm he caused. Her mother, Teresa Scott, was left completely devastated by the incident. Detective Mark Benefield explained that the 10-week investigation into Carmen's disappearance involved hundreds of hours of police work. Early on, they suspected she was murdered and carefully gathered evidence following proper legal procedures. Benefield praised the cooperation with the defendant's employer and ongoing efforts to search the construction site for more evidence. He didn't rule out further arrests or charges related to Carmen's death. The Thomas family is devastated, saying they'll never forgive Brad for his actions. However, Carmen's stepfather, Wayne Callahan, and his attorney, Stuart Grieve, acknowledged Brad's acceptance of responsibility and won't challenge the sentence. The case raises concerns about potential biases against Carmen due to her profession, but emphasizes that the victim is not to blame and Brad's actions were inexcusable. The case has garnered significant media attention due to its rarity in New Zealand. The impact on Carmen's young son, Jack, who now lives under an assumed name, is also discussed, with the need to protect him from learning the truth about his mother's fate. Welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Lindsay Birbeck. Sarah and her boyfriend Brandon arrived at her mother Lindsay's home for a scheduled tea party, but no one answered the door. This was unusual, so Sarah tried to contact her mother several times, but there was no response. She sent 2 text messages, "Where are you?" and a series of question marks, but still received no answer. After waiting outside for an hour, Sarah called her father, Tim Birbeck, to report that her mother was missing and not answering her phone. Tim picked up Sarah and Brandon and took them to his house around midnight. Sarah and Tim then returned to Lindsay's house with a spare set of keys, but found no signs of her or any indication of what might have happened. The house was in order, with no note of explanation. At 12:11 a.m. on August 13th, Tim reported Lindsay missing to the police, telling the dispatcher that his ex-wife was missing and could not be found. The disappearance of Lindsay shook the small suburban community to its core. In response, hundreds of people from the community banded together to search for her. The search party consisted of men and women, grandparents, dog walkers, teenagers with bicycles, and mothers with strollers. Despite most of them not knowing Lindsay personally, they were determined to find her. For 2 consecutive days, people gathered at Coppice, fueled by hope of finding a crucial clue that could solve the mystery of her disappearance. After days of searching, posting appeals on social media and putting up posters, the community's efforts continued unabated. However, as the days turned into weeks, it became increasingly clear that the search would be a challenging one. With each passing day, the chances of finding Lindsay alive grew slimmer. The detectives classified Lindsay as high risk, given that she had never gone missing before, and her family described her disappearance as uncharacteristic of her. Nevertheless, the search party refused to give up, driven by their determination to find Lindsay. The local community quickly sprang into action, printing and distributing thousands of posters featuring Lindsay's face throughout the neighborhood. A Facebook group dedicated to the search also rapidly gained popularity, reaching 10,000 members within hours of the police appeal being posted online. As a result, posters were soon plastered on every available surface, including lampposts, storefronts, and traffic lights, calling for the public's help in finding Lindsay. The police launched a comprehensive investigation into her disappearance from her home, involving specialist officers, dog handlers, firefighters, mountain rescue teams, volunteers, and the city's search and rescue team. They scoured the area around Coppice and the surrounding countryside, using drones and helicopters to search popular walking and running routes. 4 days after Lindsay vanished, the police released CCTV footage showing her last known movements. The footage, captured at 4:10 p.m. on Burnley Road, showed her walking towards Coppice, wearing a distinctive purple jacket, black leggings, and dark sneakers with white soles. As the search entered its 7th day, hopes of finding Lindsay alive were dwindling. Despite the extensive efforts, the police had yet to uncover any leads on her whereabouts. However, they stressed that there was no evidence to suggest she had fallen victim to a crime, leaving open the possibility that she might still be found alive. The search for Lindsay Birbeck continued into the evening, with hundreds of local residents joining the first mass public search of Coppice after a social media appeal. The breakthrough came when a local resident's dog ran into a wooded area in Errington Cemetery. The dog's strange behavior, sniffing and digging, caught its owner's attention. As the owner approached, they were met with a horrific sight, something soft and unidentifiable underfoot, accompanied by a terrible smell and swarms of flies. Peering closer, the owner saw a foot protruding from the ground, surrounded by earth and grass, wrapped in clear plastic bags. On August 24th, 12 days after Lindsay's disappearance, her body was discovered in the cemetery, buried in a shallow grave. The gruesome discovery marked the end of the search for Lindsay and the beginning of a murder investigation. Dr. Naomi Carter, a pathologist, performed an autopsy on Lindsay's body and concluded that the cause of death was a broken neck, inflicted with extreme force that crushed the larynx. The injury was likely caused by a foot or knee strike. Additionally, there were signs of an attempt to amputate Lindsay's right leg with a saw after her death, resulting in a deep laceration down to the bone. Despite the poor condition of the body, Dr. Carter found that Lindsay's injuries were catastrophic. However, she could not rule out the possibility of sexual activity on the day of Lindsay's disappearance due to the advanced state of decomposition. Before Lindsay's body was discovered, the police and members of the public had searched the area for several days without finding anything. During the search, community volunteers and a police dog handler reported seeing a blue wheelie garbage can abandoned in nearby bushes, but its significance was not yet understood. On August 20th, at 9 p.m., volunteers searching the cemetery found a dumpster with a dark stain on the outside, which they suspected might be blood. They took photos and called the police. 2 officers arrived, inspected the dumpster, and found a brown mark that they believed was dirt. Despite this, they decided the dumpster looked new and there was no evidence linking it to Lindsay's disappearance, so they left it in place. Around the same time, other important clues were discovered in the cemetery, but initially overlooked. On August 18th, local resident Christine Alderson found a bloody cloth on the grass while walking her dogs with her daughter. Although she thought the fresh red blood might belong to a homeless man who frequented the area, she still reported it. Another dog walker, Judith Bibby, found red clothing hanging on a barbed wire fence near the Cardinal Hill Trail, which was likely Lindsay's jacket. She also heard a child's voice, but no signs of struggle, yelling, or screaming. On August 25th, investigators returned to the crime scene and discovered a yellow-handled saw and a pair of green heavy-duty gloves near Lindsay's grave. The gloves had traces of blood on them, and upon forensic testing, the results showed that the gloves contained the perpetrator's DNA on the inside surfaces, while Lindsay's DNA was found on the outside surface of the left glove. Additionally, a pair of Lindsay's Skechers sneakers, which had been cut along the sole, were found in a blue plastic bag discarded in the cemetery. Further analysis of the evidence revealed that Lindsay's body had been wrapped in plastic sheeting, and beneath the sheeting, foliage and grass not native to the cemetery grounds were found. This led investigators to conclude that Lindsay's body had been moved from a different location before being buried in the cemetery. During the investigation, detectives remembered a blue trash can that had caught volunteers' attention. Reviewing CCTV footage, they made a surprising discovery: a young man pulling a blue wheelie garbage can in the Burley Road area multiple times. The same camera caught him visiting the cemetery 4 times. A suspect emerged, and footage of him carrying a trash can sparked a stir when broadcast on the news. The public helped identify the 16-year-old who surrendered to police the same day. Rocky Marciano Price, a local resident, was the boy in the videotape. He lived with his parents and 5 siblings in their family home of 3 decades on Winnie Hill Road in Arrington. Rocky had several mental health conditions, including autism, attention deficit disorder, and hyperactivity, which he had struggled with since childhood. His low IQ added to his learning and communication challenges. Rocky attended an alternative school in Barnoldswick a few days a week, where teachers described him as quiet and nonverbal. A 2015 psychologist's report found that Rocky had a limited understanding of his emotions and emotional well-being. He struggled to connect events and emotions. A 2016 report stated that Rocky was unresponsive to strangers and required constant supervision and care. His teachers, including Timothy Bradley, who taught at the school for 18 months, tried to engage Rocky in his education, but he preferred hands-on activities to academic subjects. Rocky rarely participated in conversations, even when discussing topics that interested him. Despite this, he was physically strong and tough for his age. He enjoyed activities like going to the gym, tending to the family's chickens, watching movies, and playing Xbox. Rocky seemed to exist in his own world, often unaware of his actions. Rocky Price randomly targeted Lindsay, killing her simply because she was lonely in the wrong place at the wrong time. On the first anniversary of the crime, August 12, 2020, Price went on trial and was unanimously found guilty by a jury after an 8-day retrial and 4 hours of deliberation. Although Price admitted to helping dispose of Lindsay's body, he claimed he had no role in her murder. He stated that a stranger approached him and asked for his help in burying the body in exchange for payment. However, evidence found at his home in Arrington contradicted his claim, including plastic bags identical to those found at Lindsay's grave. Additionally, a tracksuit and other clothing found at his home matched the outfit he wore on surveillance cameras on August 12th, 16th, and 17th, further implicating him in the crime. Defense attorney Mark Fenn Halls argued that Rocky Price, although responsible for burying the victim's body in the cemetery, was not her killer. Despite substantial evidence, Price pleaded not guilty to the crime, but admitted to moving the body. During the trial, Price, through his attorney, provided a statement explaining his movements between the crime scene in Copus and the cemetery where the body was found. However, the prosecutor maintained that Price acted alone. The motive behind the random attack on 47-year-old mother of two, Lindsay, was never revealed, as the perpetrator did not know the victim. The judge sentenced Price to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 16 years. He will be eligible for release when the parole board deems him no longer a danger to society. The judge described the attack as swift and brutal, stating that Price clearly intended to kill a woman who was walking alone just minutes before Lindsay's incident. Meanwhile, another woman, Zoe Braithwaite, had a narrow escape from a similar attack. She encountered a suspicious teenager wearing a hood and walking alone on a parallel path. Her instincts kicked in, and she became wary of the individual, noticing that he looked out of place for a walk in the woods at that time of year. She quickened her pace and eventually ran away, likely saving her own life. The judge noted that if it hadn't been Zoe, it could have been someone else, and it was unfortunately Lindsay who fell victim. This was a calculated and intentional attack. After attempting to target one woman, he deliberately pursued another lone woman. His actions after the crime reveal his ability to think and plan. His teachers testified that he excelled in practical tasks, which he utilized to conceal the body. Rocky Price made 2 trips to Copus on the evening of August 12th. At 6:55 p.m., he was caught on CCTV cameras carrying a black backpack, possibly containing a saw to dismember Lindsay's body. Later, at 8:28 p.m., dog walker Anthony Doe witnessed him pulling out an empty trash can from the same location where his grandfather and other family members are buried. Without showing any signs of panic or excitement, Rocky Price executed a premeditated plan to dispose of Lindsay's body. He placed her in a blue trash can, dragged her to the cemetery, and spent over an hour burying her near the railroad line. He left behind a saw, gloves, and a trash can at the scene. The senseless and brutal murder of a stranger in broad daylight is deeply disturbing to society. The random nature of the attack and his prior stalking of another woman demonstrate that he poses a significant threat to the public. Rocky Marciano Price's name and photo were published for the first time after a judge lifted restrictions following his guilty verdict. Previously, his identity was kept secret due to his young age. Although the jury knew details about Price, they were not fully disclosed until after the verdict. Price's mental illness does not excuse his actions, as he knew killing was wrong. Lindsay's funeral was held at St. Margaret's Church in Hapton on September 20th, where over 200 mourners gathered to pay their respects. As police directed traffic on Manchester Road, Lindsay's coffin, adorned with flowers, was carried into the church. The outpouring of sympathy was evident in the dozens of bouquets from friends, family, and strangers alike left at the scene in her memory. According to her daughter Sarah, Lindsay was a woman full of optimism and positivity, always looking forward to the future. In fact, she had plans to visit Glasgow with her friend Sharon and was hoping to find love on the Match.com dating site. Tragically, her bright future was cut short on a sunny summer day. Rocky Price's fascination with death and mutilation may be a symptom of a deeper issue, such as autism. This neurodevelopmental disorder can cause difficulties with social interaction, motor skills, and repetitive behaviors, leading to withdrawal and isolation. While the exact cause is unclear, the consequences of Rocky's actions fit the severity of his crime, including burying Lindsay's mutilated body. Welcome to our channel. Today, we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Varka Rani. In 2012, Jasveer Ram Ginde, a 29-year-old banker, lived in Wallal Town, England, while his parents resided in India. They would frequently call him, urging him to get married since he had reached a marriageable age. Jasveer, however, would consistently ignore their requests until he finally relented in 2012. His parents were overjoyed by his decision and immediately started searching for a suitable bride for their son. In October 2012, Jasveer visited India and reunited with his parents after many years. They showed him photographs of several potential brides, but he didn't find any of them appealing. A relative then suggested a girl named Varka Rani, whom they had discovered on a matrimonial website. Jasvir's parents were impressed by her profile and showed it to their son. Jasvir was immediately drawn to her picture, and his parents subsequently contacted Varka's parents to arrange a meeting between the two families. During this meeting, Varka and Jasvir were introduced to each other, and after conversing for a while, they found themselves compatible. Talks of their marriage began, and a wedding date was eventually set. Let's take a step back and learn about Varka's background. Varka Rani, who lived in Marbagh Singhnagar, Punjab, was 24 years old when Jasvir, 29, came into her life. After graduating, Varka pursued a degree in information technology and had a passion for studying, earning degrees in 4 different courses at a young age. She was the apple of her family's eye. As she approached a suitable age for marriage, her family, with her consent, created a profile for her on a matrimonial site. Through this platform, Varka found her life partner, and Jasvir planned to take her to England after their wedding. Varka's family was overjoyed, knowing that her academic achievements would make it easy for her to find a job in England as well. On March 28, 2013, Jasvir and Varka tied the knot in a traditional Indian wedding, which was a lavish affair with around 700 guests in attendance. However, shortly after the celebration, Jasvir had to return to England, while Varka's visa was still pending approval. During this period, Varka applied for an England visa, but Jasvir had already reached England. Meanwhile, Varka was eagerly waiting for her visa in India. Eventually, her wait ended, and in July, she booked a ticket to join her husband in England. Finally, on August 10, 2013, Varka arrived in England, reuniting with Jasvir. In the vicinity of Jasvir's house, there was a crematorium where the dead were cremated. The pungent smell of burning human flesh would often spread through the air when someone's funeral rites were performed, causing discomfort to Jasvir and those around him for a few hours. Now, it was September 12, 2013, and Varka had been in England for about a month. On that night, smoke began billowing from Jasvir and Varka's house, alarming their neighbors. To investigate the source of the smoke, 2 or 3 neighbors visited Jasvir's house. When they rang the doorbell, Jasvir initially didn't respond. However, when he eventually opened the door, one of the neighbors asked what was causing the smoke and smell of burning flesh in his house so late at night. In reality, no human cremation had taken place at the crematorium that day. In response, Jasvir explained that they had cleaned their house that day, accumulated some garbage, and were just burning it in the furnace, which might have been causing the smell. Hearing this, the neighbors went back to their homes, but after some time, a very strong smell started emanating again from Jasvir's house. Because of this, it became difficult for the neighbors to breathe, so one of them called the police to complain. A few minutes later, the police arrived at Jasvir's house, responding to reports from neighbors about a strange smell emanating from the residence. Jasvir provided the same evasive answers to the police's inquiries as he had to his neighbors. The police then conducted a search of Jasvir's house, discovering a 22-inch furnace in which he was burning household trash. Following their inspection, the police departed, but Jasvir subsequently went to the police station to file a complaint against his wife. In his statement, he alleged that Varka had deceived him, marrying him only to secure a pathway to England from India. According to Jasvir, the two had argued that morning, and in the evening, Varka had taken $500 and left his house. After hearing Jasvir's story, the police assured him that they would find Varka soon. Following up on his complaint, Jasvir returned home and promptly called his parents in India, recounting the entire ordeal. By the next morning, Jasvir's parents had also informed Varka's family about Varka's actions. However, on the morning of September 13th, Jasvir again burned the pot inside his house. Smoke billowed out, accompanied by a peculiar and pungent smell. This time, the neighbors found the situation utterly bizarre, prompting them to call the police once more. When the police arrived at Jasvir's house that morning, They told him that his neighbors were distressed due to his actions. The overpowering smell compelled the police to investigate its source, and they attempted to enter Jasvir's house. Without hesitation, Jasvir guided the police to his garden. The police conducted a thorough search of the entire garden, but yielded nothing. Just as they were about to leave Jasvir's house, a female officer spotted a furnace nearby, still burning with a flickering flame inside. As she removed the lid, she let out a blood-curdling scream, prompting the other officers to converge on the furnace. Inside, the officer had discovered a charred human body, the skin completely incinerated, leaving only skeletal remains. The police wasted no time in arresting Jasvir. A team of forensic experts was subsequently summoned to the scene. The severely burned body made it challenging for even the forensic pathologist to determine its gender. However, a few personal items were recovered from the furnace, including a bracelet, necklace, and ring. Following a meticulous forensic examination of the entire house, the police sequestered some of Jasvir's personal belongings, including his phone, iPad, and notably a wedding album featuring Varka and Jasvir. After meticulous scrutiny of the photos, the police made a startling discovery. Varka was wearing the same jewelry later found in the furnace by the forensic team. This revelation sparked a crucial question: did the remains belong to Varka? With these suspicions in mind, the police turned their attention to Jasvir, grilling him about his wife's whereabouts. Initially, Jasvir feigned ignorance, claiming Varka had deceived him and fled. But when confronted with the incriminating evidence gathered by forensic experts, he became visibly agitated. His story promptly shifted as he attempted to spin a new narrative for the police. Jasvir and Varka got married in March 2013, but he was initially hesitant. He was won over by her charm, and they had a grand celebration. A few months later, Varka moved to England, but then confessed she had only married him to gain independence and move. Jasvir was furious, and their arguments escalated, including a nasty fight on September 12th. Later, when Varka failed to return home at night, Jasvir's worry turned to alarm, prompting him to file a complaint at the police station. However, the police were skeptical of Jasvir's story. They subsequently questioned Jasvir's neighbors and friends, who described Varka as friendly, polite, and well-liked, while Jasvir's friends reluctantly shared disturbing details about his preference for men over women. Undeterred, Jasvir continued to fabricate stories to mislead the police. However, their investigation uncovered incriminating photos on Jasvir's iPad, which revealed a telling aspect of his personality. The police then intensified their interrogation, and Jasvir eventually cracked under the pressure, recounting a vastly different story. Jasvir confessed to the police that he had a violent fight with Varka on September 12th, during which he lost control and choked her with a vacuum cleaner pipe, resulting in her tragic death. He then transported her body to the garden, where a furnace was located, and burned it. However, this wasn't Jasvir's true story. In reality, Jasvir had known he was gay and attracted to men since he was 12. After completing his education in India, he moved to England, where he landed a job at a bank. In 2008, he began a relationship with a gay man and had also confided in some close friends about his sexual orientation. In 2013, Jasvir's family began pressuring him to get married soon. Unwilling to reveal his true identity to his family, Jasvir agreed to marry Varka. After bringing Varka to England, their relationship remained platonic. However, when Varka discovered inappropriate pictures of Jasvir with his gay partner on his iPad, their disagreements turned into arguments, with Varka threatening to expose Jasvir's secret to his family. Jasvir was consumed by rage when he strangled Varka, ultimately leading to her death. In an attempt to dispose of her body, he burned her in the furnace, but the pungent smell of burning flesh alerted the neighbors, who promptly notified the authorities. On the morning of September 13th, Jasvir returned to the furnace, only to find that some remains were still intact, prompting him to douse the body with petrol and set it ablaze once more. However, the putrid smell spread again, and when the police arrived at Jasvir's doorstep for the second time, they apprehended him as the husband who had murdered his new bride upon her discovery of his sexual orientation. Jasvir, a native of Warsaw, brutally killed Varka Rani just a few months into their marriage. The news sent shockwaves through both Jasvir's and Varka's families. Jasvir's family struggled to come to terms with their son's sexuality, while Varka's family was consumed by grief. The evidence against Jasvir was overwhelming, and he was subsequently taken into custody and brought to trial at Wolverhampton Crown Court. Although Jasvir initially attempted to denial and deceive to avoid punishment, he was eventually sentenced to life imprisonment after a grueling 3-month trial. Furthermore, he would be ineligible for parole for at least 20 years. To take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Roxanne Valdez. Roxanne Valdez was born in a small village in the province of Punta Arenas, Chile, in 1957. Roxana Valdez was married to a man whose name remains undisclosed or unknown to the press. She had a son with him. It's clear that her marriage wasn't the dream every girl hopes for, as the couple eventually parted ways in 2011. As a single mother in a small village where jobs were scarce, Roxana faced significant challenges. In such communities, the primary occupation was growing and selling fruits and vegetables, and even the local educational institutions focused on agriculture. It was in this setting that Roxana found employment at the Don Gregorio boarding school, which trained students to become agricultural technicians. She worked as a night supervisor at the school, ensuring that students slept at night and didn't engage in unruly activities. Her responsibilities didn't include the actual upbringing of the children. Roxana's son attended the same boarding school where she worked. As a single mother, she spent her days working in the fields, leaving her little time to devote to her son. At the school, Claudio Munoz Ramirez was the head of grounds maintenance. His night shifts often brought him into contact with Roxana, despite their 14-year age difference. They discovered common interests and bonded over their personal struggles. Roxana shared stories about the school and her failed marriage, while Claudio confided in her about his unhappy relationship with his wife and his adoration for his 2 daughters. Though he felt disconnected from his wife and had considered divorce, he remained in the marriage to honor a promise to his late father-in-law. Over time, Claudio's priorities shifted, and he began spending more time with Roxana, eventually leaving his family without explanation. Roxana welcomed him into her life, and their relationship accelerated rapidly. However, in her haste, she overlooked the fact that Claudio was temperamental and sometimes cruel, as well as the needs of her own children, who required constant attention. On a scheduled community cleanup day at the boarding school, Claudio's first serious outburst of aggression occurred. Students were assigned different areas to clean and were given the necessary supplies, including brooms, buckets, dustpans, and rags. However, some students refused to participate, which infuriated Claudio, who was in charge of cleanliness but lacked teaching experience. In the absence of teachers, he threatened to physically harm any student who didn't clean. Although it's unclear if he would have carried out this threat, the students eventually began cleaning. Later, they collectively complained to the principal about Claudio's threats of violence, which displeased the principal. As a result, the principal asked Claudio to resign voluntarily. It's worth noting that the Don Gregorio boarding school was almost the only place in the area that offered stable and reasonably paid employment. Claudio initially spent some time searching for work in fields and at fruit stalls, but when his efforts proved unsuccessful, he and Roxana decided to seek a better life elsewhere. They left her son at the boarding school to continue his education, as they deemed it too risky to take him with them, fearing they would become too dependent on employers. Having already had a bad experience, the couple decided to start their own small business, a fruit kiosk. They relocated to the commune of Molina, a couple of hours' drive from the Chilean capital, which is renowned for its vineyards that produce well-known wine brands exported globally. Roxana and Claudio bought a kiosk near their new home, found suppliers for vegetables and fruits, and took their first steps in their small family business. Claudio was responsible for purchasing and transporting products from suppliers to the kiosk, while Roxana handled sales throughout the day. They couldn't afford to hire an employee, as this would have meant additional expenses. And they were also concerned that an employee might not closely monitor the perishable goods, leading to further losses. Claudio was visibly upset and even angry when he found out that Roxana was pregnant with their first child together. He needed time to reflect on this, but Roxana, blinded by her new relationship and their thriving business, didn't disagree with his point of view. She agreed that after the child was born, they would give it to her relatives to raise. However, it turned out that there was no child to give away. Since then, Claudio's behavior changed drastically. He frequently yelled at his wife and occasionally resorted to physical violence. The neighbors, unhappy with the noisy disputes, often called the Chilean police, the Carabineros, to intervene and calm the domestic disputes. On one occasion, the police responded to a distress call to find Roxana in a distraught state, crying and partially undressed, as she fled her home with Claudio chasing after her. When the officers arrived, Roxana broke down and confided in them, revealing that she had been a victim of ongoing domestic abuse, which had even led to her suffering a miscarriage. This traumatic experience had left her requiring psychological help. Nevertheless, as time passed, the couple appeared to put the incident behind them, and they resumed their life together as if the ordeal had never occurred. Despite the incident warranting criminal charges, Roxana showed compassion and gave Claudio a second chance, extracting a promise that it was an isolated incident. Claudio vowed to never again exhibit such behavior, but his history of abuse with his ex-wife cast doubt on his reliability. Sadly, the pattern of abuse persisted, and history repeated itself. Claudio stopped physically abusing Roxana, but started going out at night to drink excessively in local bars. He would spend a significant portion of their family's income not only on alcohol, but also on relationships with disreputable women. Roxana tolerated her husband's behavior, hoping that he would change once they had a child together. Her hope was partially fulfilled. In 2013, Roxana gave birth to a healthy child, and Claudio ended his partying lifestyle, diverting his attention to their business, which required expansion. They acquired another kiosk in a nearby area and an additional vehicle for transporting products. Roxana also invested in firearms for protection, as their work and living environments were not very safe. The family's wealth grew substantially, but it was only on paper. Despite this, Claudio went back to his old habits, wasting money on drinking and once again resorting to violence against Roxana at home. According to Roxana's testimony, the abuse she suffered at Claudio's hands continually worsened over time. At first, Claudio only drank occasionally, but he soon began to do so more and more frequently. When he came home drunk, he would accuse Roxana of being unfaithful, even though she was innocent, and this would lead to physical and sexual abuse, even when she was pregnant. Claudio's actions seemed intentionally designed to cause harm, and they ultimately led to Roxana having a miscarriage in August 2012, which sent her into a deep and prolonged depression. Claudio followed his usual routine by visiting a local bar one night, staying out until the next morning. Roxana, accustomed to his behavior, still worried about him. However, it turned out that Claudio had stolen 5 million Chilean pesos, equivalent to around $6,000, from their daughter's room. The money, earned from selling Roxana's mother's house, was intended for their joint business venture. Roxana was shocked and felt betrayed by Claudio's actions, which he used to fund his excessive drinking and brothel visits. When Claudio finally returned home late that evening, Roxana confronted him about the missing money. Instead of discussing the issue, Claudio assaulted her and confessed to squandering the entire amount. This was the final straw for Roxana, who, without hesitation, went to their bedroom, retrieved a .38 caliber revolver intended for protection against local criminals, and shot Claudio in the chest at close range. The shot proved fatal, and Claudio died instantly. Roxana was taken aback by her own drastic actions and attempted to stop the bleeding from the gunshot wound, but it was too late. Her desperate act marked a tragic end to the ongoing turmoil in their domestic life. In her testimony, Roxana expressed deep remorse and acknowledged the immorality of her actions. She confessed that her intention was to kill Claudio, not intimidate him, citing the numerous instances of abuse and assault she had suffered at his hands. Roxana regretted not reporting these incidents to the authorities or withdrawing her complaint out of fear, even before they had a child together. After shooting Claudio, Roxana's primary concern was the potential impact on their young daughter, particularly if she were imprisoned and the child were sent to an institution. That night, Roxana decided the best course of action would be to dispose of the body and report Claudio missing. Aware that his frequent drinking binges that often led to his disappearance were well known to the police. Roxana found disposing of the body a daunting task. She decided to dismember it piece by piece, initially using 5 kitchen knives intended for meat cutting to sever the limbs and head as they kept dulling. She then boiled the dismembered parts in her largest pots, all while interacting with her young daughter, who remained oblivious to her mother's actions and her father's fate. The following day, Roxana packed the cooled body parts into plastic containers, organizing them separately: hands, legs, head, and torso. Each container was then placed in a separate garbage bag. She loaded the bags into her car and drove to St. Lucia, intending to scatter them on a vacant lot. Before leaving, she thoroughly cleaned her house with bleach. However, upon arriving at the designated site, Roxana couldn't muster the courage to dispose of the bags, despite finding a suitable location. In her testimony, Roxana expressed her internal conflict, stating that it was strange she had the bravery to commit the heinous crime and dismember a human body as if it were an animal. But she couldn't bring herself to dispose of the evidence. She mentioned being nervous throughout the drive, feeling constantly watched, fearing the police would stop and search her car at any moment. This fear led to panic, even though she had a backup plan involving her daughter, pretending to rush her to the hospital if stopped. She even thought of how to make her cry louder by pinching her. Roxana was unable to get rid of the remains, so she took them back home and hid them in the garage. She then thoroughly cleaned the interior of her car with bleach. Next, she visited Claudio's relatives, telling them that he had stolen a large amount of money and had been absent for days. They didn't seem to care, simply shrugging in response. After that, Roxana visited her mother and brother. Her mother was extremely concerned about Roxana's behavior, noticing that she hadn't eaten, had a glazed expression, and kept asking the same questions over and over. The only question Roxana answered quickly was when her mother asked about Claudio's whereabouts, saying that he had gone to buy supplies for their store, but had gotten a flat tire and was delayed getting back home. Alone with her thoughts and the hidden evidence, Roxana broke down and called her brother for help. When he arrived, she confessed everything, sharing the nightmarish years she endured with Claudio, and showed him the containers holding the body. Her brother was shocked, but instead of offering help, he refused, fearing police involvement and the possibility of being charged as an accomplice. He urged Roxana to confess to the Carabineros, insisting he would do it if she didn't. Disappointed but realizing she had no other choice, Roxana decided to take his advice. That night, she went to the 4th police station, announcing her intention to make an important statement. The officers, familiar with her husband's troublesome behavior, initially thought she wanted to report him again. However, they were shocked by her confession. Roxana was immediately arrested, and the news spread rapidly throughout the area, attracting a swarm of journalists around the station. The case against Roxana seemed clear-cut. She had confessed to the crime, provided evidence, and surrendered voluntarily. However, prosecutor Monica Bisas was not convinced. She was skeptical about the ease with which Roxana had confessed and wanted to investigate further. Bezos requested an extension of Roxana's arrest to conduct a forensic examination, hoping to prove that her victim, Claudio, was still alive when she dismembered him. This would have significantly increased Roxana's sentence. The judge agreed to a 60-day detention for further investigation. Meanwhile, Roxana's defense attorney, Carolina Gutierrez, argued that Roxana had acted while under extreme emotional distress, possibly exacerbated by postpartum depression and chronic domestic abuse. She pointed out that Roxana's cooperation and voluntary confession should be considered mitigating factors. However, the prosecution's theory that Claudio was alive during the dismemberment was later disproven by forensic results, which confirmed that Claudio had died from a gunshot wound to the chest. The bullet from the .38 caliber revolver had caused a heart rupture and damaged vital organs. Following these developments, the aggravating circumstances were dismissed. In a separate development, lawyer Juan Pablo Cardenas, who was seeking to make a name for himself in this high-profile case, noted that the firearm used in the murder was legally registered. He also pointed out that Roxana's first report of domestic violence to the police was filed just 20 days after the couple started living together. Psychologist Rodrigo Valenzuela submitted documents to the court after a medical examination stating that Roxana was extremely mentally unstable at the time of the crime. According to his findings, she lacked full awareness of her actions and suffered from emotional instability, which was linked to the recent loss of 2 children, one in August 2012 and another just 3 weeks before the crime. Prosecutors' forensic exam showed Claudio's blood alcohol level was 3 Gr/L at death on April 17, 2015. After a year of investigation, Roxana's trial began. The media dubbed it the Melina Cooks case and sensationalized it, claiming Roxana ate part of the remains to attract attention. Distressed, Roxana refused to make statements during the trial. The prosecutors attempted to sway the judge's opinion by highlighting that, according to Chilean law, Roxana had committed a serious offense, the murder of her own father, patricide, although they failed to provide evidence that the crime was premeditated. In contrast, the defense attorney countered that his client had acted in self-defense, protecting herself from a violent aggressor who had subjected her to years of abuse and mistreatment. The trial, which lasted several weeks, was closely followed by the entire population of Chile. Prosecutor Monica requested a 15-year prison sentence for Roxana, but after careful consideration of the defense and the jury's opinion, the judges sentenced her to 6 years in a correctional facility with a lenient regime. Claudio's relatives, who had been hoping for a life sentence or even the death penalty, were outraged when they heard the prosecutor's request for only 15 years. They were devastated by the court's decision and rejected any suggestion of violence within the family. They argued that Claudio, a successful businessman, could not have stolen $6,000 from Roxana, and claimed that he had confessed to them that Roxana had often threatened to kill him, having previously taken out a revolver from the closet and warned him of her intentions. Claudio's sister blamed Chile's system of justice, claiming it to be corrupt, as evidenced by the short sentences given to brutal criminals, similar to those for minor robberies. Claudio's first wife, Giselle, defended him, asserting that he was not violent, based on her experience of living with him for many years without incident. In contrast, Roxana was prone to jealous outbursts and possessiveness, often sparking disputes. Roxana's sentence was shortened due to good behavior, and she was transferred to a semi-open education center, where she was allowed to communicate with her daughter. Eventually, she was released early, sparking widespread outrage among the public, who felt that the cook from Melina was let off lightly. However, some people saw Roxana as a victim and justified her actions, despite considering her a murderer. This case continues to be debated in the country, highlighting the severe consequences of unchecked domestic. Welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Liana Friedenbach. Liana Friedenbach and Felipe Café, the young people involved in this tragedy, came from different backgrounds. Liana, born in May 1987 in São Paulo, was the elder of 2 children in a wealthy and respected family. Her father, Henry Friedenbach, was a successful lawyer and a well-known figure in the city. Felipe Silva Café, also from São Paulo, was born in July 1984, but grew up in a large, modest family. From a young age, he worked part-time to support himself and help his family. They met at school and developed a strong friendship that blossomed into romance. However, they had to keep their relationship a secret. Liana's parents, who were strict and religious, had brought her up to attend Sunday school and church regularly and were opposed to her dating at such a young age. Social inequality also contributed significantly to the situation, as she came from a wealthy family while her partner was from a poor background. However, the parents' prohibitions did not deter the young lovers from staying together. Instead, they started secretly dating in various locations where they would not be seen, just to spend some time together. In the fall of 2003, the lovers decided to take a trip to a secluded area to be alone for a while. They carefully planned the trip, which was meant to be an exciting adventure for them. They came up with a believable alibi to justify their absence and avoid arousing suspicion. Felipe told his parents that he and his friends were going on a camping trip. Liana, on the other hand, told her parents that she was going on a sightseeing trip with some guys from church, knowing that they would not question her further. The Friedenbach and Café families believed the fabricated stories and let their children go without any concerns. Liana and Felipe were overjoyed that they could spend a whole week together, free from their parents' scrutiny and judgment. The young couple decided to visit the picturesque province of Iguaçu. They packed lightly, bringing a tent, sleeping bags, some personal items, and a small supply of food. However, they faced a significant challenge. They had hardly any money. As students, they were entitled to free public transportation, so they planned their route in advance to reach their destination by bus. On the morning of October 31st, the lovers met at the agreed meeting point, careful not to be seen by anyone who knew them. They caught the first bus and, after arriving in another city in the evening, spent the night at the bus station. 2 more bus rides took them to their desired location. From there, they had to walk a few kilometers to a secluded spot in the woods where they planned to camp and spend a few days alone together. Despite their fatigue after the long journey, the warm and sunny day put them in high spirits, and they joked, laughed, and made plans for their mini vacation. Once they reached the spot marked on their map, they began setting up their modest but cozy camp. Liana and Felipe's plans were ruined by unwelcome visitors. When they traveled to a remote and secluded area, they didn't consider that poverty and crime often thrive in such places. Their arrival didn't go unnoticed, especially since they were well-dressed and carrying large backpacks and bags as they walked through the forest to the abandoned farm where they planned to stay. They caught the attention of local bandits, Paulo Cesar de Silva Marques, nicknamed Perran Buku, and Roberto Alves Cardoso, known as Chino, who was only 16 but already led the gang. The bandits were interested in the strangers, particularly the beautiful young girl. They decided that the backpacks likely contained valuables and could be robbed. The bandits secretly followed the couple and watched from the underbrush. Liana and Felipe set up their tent, had a snack, and began to clean up their campsite. The bandits waited in ambush until they were certain no one else would join the couple and that they didn't have any weapons. Perran Buku and Chino then attacked Liana and Felipe, threatening them, and Felipe, frightened, didn't even try to run away or fight back against the unknown attackers. Having thoroughly searched all the bags and backpacks, the criminals found nothing of value. They then decided to demand a ransom from the boys' and girls' relatives. Liana, terrified, quickly revealed that she came from a wealthy family and her father would pay them any amount they demanded. The criminals were thrilled with this development, but lacking experience in such cases, they were unsure how to proceed to get the money and release the prisoners. As they refined their plan, the bandits tried to determine the value of their captives and the ransom they could demand. To prevent escape, they decided to hide the prisoners. Initially, they were taken to a rundown structure near the farm where they were staying, but it lacked windows and doors. Later, they were moved to the home of one of the gang members. There, Felipe was tied up and brutally beaten to prevent escape and resistance. That night, the gang members took turns abusing the bound and helpless Liana, ultimately breaking her spirit. The kidnappers were unable to figure out how to demand and collect a ransom, so they decided to kill the captives and hide their bodies in the woods, making it unlikely they would ever be found. After torturing the kidnappers took them to a remote area in the woods the following day. Pernambuco took the badly beaten Felipe deep into the forest, where a gunshot was heard, and then he returned alone. Liana realized what had happened and that her loved one was dead. Although the kidnappers tried to convince Liana that they had released Felipe, they had other sinister plans in mind for her. They intended to keep her captive as their plaything until they grew tired of her, especially since no one had begun searching for the missing boys at that time. A couple of days after Liana left, her parents discovered that there was no church excursion trip, and her friends were unaware of her whereabouts. The Friedenbach family suspected that Liana had run off with her boyfriend, Felipe, and immediately contacted his parents. However, Felipe's family believed he had gone camping with friends, so they couldn't assist in locating the couple. The situation was complicated by the fact that neither Liana nor Felipe had been in contact for several days, and their phones were turned off. Thanks to the Friedenbach family's connections and resources, they were able to mobilize the entire city's police force to track the couple's trail, step by step. Through trickery, they managed to reconstruct the route the young people took after running away from home. The police arrived at Embu Guasu, where the last bus had dropped them off, and from there they had to navigate through a deserted wooded area on foot. This was also the last location where their phones were still online. A massive search operation was launched, involving police officers, rescuers, and concerned citizens who had learned about the incident and wanted to help. A local businessman even offered his personal helicopter to aid in the search effort and distributed flyers with photos of the missing pair. The search party quickly found the couple's camp, but what they saw was chilling. Although there were no signs of bloodshed or struggle, it was clear that something horrific had taken place. The contents of their bags had been emptied and scattered about. Their tent had been sliced open from top to bottom with a knife, and the guys' phones were lying nearby. As the rescuers combed through the area, they soon stumbled upon Philippe's lifeless body. The young man had been shot in the back of the head at close range, and it was clear that he had never stood a chance. Although the chances of finding Liana alive were now extremely low, the searchers held on to hope, however slim. Henry Friedenbach actively sought the help of the press to widely publicize the search for Liana, ensuring that as many people as possible were aware of the situation. A substantial reward was offered for any information about her whereabouts, although unfortunately, this did not lead to a breakthrough in the case. Once the criminals had disposed of Felipe, they returned Liana to the same house where they had previously held both her and Felipe captive. By this time, the group of criminals had been joined by their accomplices, Antonio Gano da Silva and Agnaldo Pius Chino. Agnaldo, in particular, callously declared that Liana was now his property and that he had the freedom to do with her as he pleased. He then shockingly invited the others to indulge in their darkest desires with Liana, an invitation that was quickly accepted by the group. A day after the large-scale search operation began, the criminals relocated with their captive Liana to the house of Anthony Matias de Barros, another gang member. That evening, they took Liana with them when they went fishing. The ringleader showed a pretense of concern by putting his jacket over her due to the chilly weather. Later that evening, Chino's older brother, who was unaware of his siblings' illegal activities, arrived at the same location. Chino introduced Liana to his brother as his girlfriend, but the brother immediately recognized her as the girl the police were searching for. The brother took Chino aside and warned him that the police were closing in on them. Chino saw this as a warning and decided it was time to eliminate Liana and flee. He deceived Liana by telling her she was free to go and he would escort her to the road. However, he actually led her into the forest where he brutally stabbed her to death with a knife and then crushed her skull with a rock to ensure she was dead. Liana's body was discovered 5 days after the massacre, with no signs of life and severe mutilation. The key piece of evidence was the killer's jacket, which Liana was wearing. The perpetrators were not only cruel, cynical, and ruthless, but also incredibly stupid and short-sighted. Despite their brutality, they did not attempt to flee, hide, or destroy the physical evidence, believing they would never be caught. This overconfidence ultimately led to their quick identification and apprehension by the police. The ringleader, Chino, made a crucial mistake by leaving his jacket on Liana's body, which retained his sweat marks. He then took the murder weapon to his house, washing it and hiding it in the yard. He also tried to wash his blood-stained clothes so he could continue wearing them. However, DNA analysis ultimately linked the gang members to the crime, allowing the police to apprehend them almost simultaneously. The ringleader did not deny his involvement in the crime and instead chose to testify, bragging about kidnapping, abusing, and ultimately killing the victim, Liana. He provided a detailed account of her final days. Following a lengthy trial, most adult members of the criminal gang received severe sentences. However, the ringleader, Chino, was only 16 at the time of the crimes, so he was sent to a specialized juvenile prison with a relatively lenient regime. During his incarceration, Chino made multiple escape attempts and exhibited aggressive and inappropriate behavior, which led to a psychiatric evaluation. The examination revealed several mental abnormalities, which cumulatively turned him into a calculating sadist and murderer devoid of pity or remorse. Chino, responsible for the murder of young men, was sent to a secure medical facility for mandatory treatment and rehabilitation despite the family's numerous appeals. His living conditions are now comfortable, with a private room featuring a large TV, internet access, and a comfortable bed with an orthopedic mattress. He receives 4 balanced meals a day with a customized menu, and his monthly maintenance costs around approximately $2,500. In recent years, Chino has repeatedly requested his release, arguing that he has completed his treatment and no longer poses a threat to anyone, allowing him to resume our channel. Today, we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Sabrina Kuiter. Sabrina Kuiter was born on December 5, 1982, in a London suburb to parents of French and Algerian descent, giving her a unique cultural heritage. This blend of influences likely contributed to her striking features and fiery personality. As the eldest of 4 children, Sabrina was cherished by her family and often held up as a model for her siblings. At the age of 2, her family moved to Paris, France, where she spent most of her childhood and adolescence. However, during her school years, Sabrina's complex and difficult personality began to emerge. Former classmates have described her as arrogant, domineering, self-absorbed, and extremely selfish. She had few friends, either at school or in her neighborhood, as she believed she was superior to those around her. Sabrina was particularly hostile towards bright and outgoing girls, viewing them as rivals and enemies. Despite her stunning physical appearance, she was a striking brunette with brown eyes and an impressive figure. Sabrina's inability to form genuine connections with others held her back from pursuing a career in modeling, where her looks could have taken her far. Instead, she often sought to manipulate those around her. As a child, Sabrina showed promise in sports and had some interest in music. But her lack of persistence and inconsistent effort hindered her from achieving success in either area. Later, Sabrina alleged that she was mistreated by her maternal relatives in France during her childhood, but these claims were never confirmed. In contrast, her family maintained that they spoiled her and that she always sought attention. During her teenage years, Sabrina's athletic ambitions were prematurely halted by a back injury, which in turn led to her dependence on prescription painkillers. In an attempt to obtain these drugs illegally, she was arrested and received a warning from the police. Sabrina was extremely self-absorbed, constantly craving attention and admiration for her appearance. She firmly believed that her future would be filled with luxury, glamour, and interactions with celebrities, and was even convinced she was born to be a star. At times, her fantasies became so vivid that they distorted her perception of reality, making her believe she belonged in the Hollywood elite. Sabrina holds a degree in English and French literature from the Sorbonne, but since 2006, she has falsely claimed to work in various roles in the fashion industry, such as stylist, makeup artist, fashion designer, or designer, despite lacking actual expertise. Sabrina, known for her stunning looks, has a history of captivating men and exploiting their affection. However, she never considered any of her suitors worthy of a serious relationship, waiting instead for a submissive partner who would obey her every command. After completing her education, Sabrina remained unclear about her life goals, feeling entitled to everything without putting in effort. Nevertheless, she enrolled at the prestigious Sorbonne University and simultaneously worked at a sweet shop to support herself financially. It was there, at the age of 18, that she met Wissem Medouni. Medouni, 6 years her senior, was a manager at a major French company's head office and a graduate of one of Paris's most prestigious universities. He aspired to earn a master's degree to advance his career, despite not being particularly handsome or part of elite social circles. He fell deeply in love with Sabrina and was willing to fulfill all her desires. Sabrina, in turn, found Medouni appealing, seeing him as someone she could manipulate and as a ticket to a wealthy lifestyle. She was drawn to his ambition and capacity for career success, as well as his willingness to pamper and spoil her. The couple began dating in 2000 and moved in together within a few months. Sabrina's true nature was soon exposed as she attempted to control Medouni in every way possible. When her demands were not met, she would throw tantrums, manipulate others, and even resort to physical violence. Moreover, she began to openly cheat on Medouni, not even trying to hide her infidelity or justify her actions. She would engage in flings with anyone, from casual acquaintances to Medouni's closest friends or colleagues. Despite Medouni's numerous attempts to end the relationship and leave her, he always found himself returning to her, unable to break free from his deep love for Sabrina. In 2001, Medouni achieved his master's degree and a significant promotion, resulting in a substantial increase in income. He spent lavishly on Sabrina's luxurious clothing and entertainment. As his family owned several properties in Paris, he managed them and handed over all the rental income to Sabrina. Medouni, who shared Franco-Algerian roots with Sabrina, saw her as a kindred spirit. According to reports, in the fall of 2001, they had a Muslim ceremony, which was documented by a certificate from the Argento Mosque. However, this religious ceremony was not enough to make their union official and legal. The couple had a son, whose paternity Medouni officially recognized. Years later, however, a Frenchman named Anthony Francois claimed to be the child's biological father. Francois, who would later testify in Sabrina's trial, described her as volatile, unpredictable, promiscuous, and manipulative. In 2008, the global financial crisis led to Wissem Medouni losing his high-paying job when the company he worked for went bankrupt. Around the same time, Sabrina Kuyder became fixated on moving to London, and she made the decision to relocate without fully consulting Medouni. With little choice, Medouni followed her to London, where he found work at a major English bank. However, Sabrina struggled to establish herself in the fashion industry due to her lack of skills, experience, and formal education. Over time, she had to lower her expectations and took on various jobs, including working as a nanny, in a call center, at a cafe, and even attempting network marketing. Sabrina's pursuit of love and success took an unexpected turn when she revived her teenage passion for music and added musician and composer to her credentials. Despite her enthusiasm, Sabrina faced challenges finding professional opportunities in the music industry. She attended numerous auditions and social events, hoping to make valuable connections. Sabrina met Mark Walton, a famous musician and songwriter, at an event. Mark was one of the founding members of Boyzone, a well-known Irish boy band. After leaving the group, he became a successful producer and music mogul, working with artists like Jennifer Lopez, Jessica Simpson, and Lady Gaga. By 2016, his net worth had exceeded $1 billion. To Sabrina, Mark was the perfect person to meet, her key to a world of fame and luxury. She impressed Mark with her beauty and charisma, and he fell in love with her at first sight. As their relationship progressed quickly, Sabrina made an effort to be pleasant and endearing, eventually ending her relationship with Maduni as she saw a promising future with Mark. Mark's previous relationship and child didn't deter Sabrina, and soon the couple moved in together, living in a luxurious house in an upscale London area. Mark covered all the expenses, including the rent for the lavish house Sabrina had chosen. For several months, Sabrina lived the luxurious life she had always dreamed of, socializing with celebrities, attending elite events, wearing designer clothing, and even appearing in glossy magazines. Sabrina found it difficult to manage Mark because she was afraid of losing him. Her inability to control her nature eventually led to jealousy towards every woman around Mark. Over time, Sabrina's demands grew, and she began to crave more gifts and luxury. Mark tried to please her by showering her with designer clothes, jewelry, and taking her to upscale restaurants and clubs, but no matter what he did, it was never enough to satisfy her. Sabrina's home had a revolving door of staff and nannies due to her growing paranoia. She suspected them of theft or trying to seduce Mark, which led to a high turnover rate. Her irrational behavior pushed Mark to the edge, and in 2011, he ended their relationship and moved to California, leaving Sabrina with nothing. When Mark left, Sabrina lost the luxurious lifestyle she had grown accustomed to. In an attempt to win him back, she started giving interviews accusing Mark of being violent and abusive. She would call him, crying and begging him to return, even threatening to take her own life, but none of these tactics worked. Realizing she had lost Mark, Sabrina reached out to her ex-partner, Wissam Maduni, whose career was thriving as a bank executive. He forgave her and took her back, still harboring feelings for her. They resumed living together, and soon after reuniting, Sabrina discovered she was pregnant. Sabrina informed Walton, who, through his lawyers, offered to provide for the child and her, offering a monthly allowance. However, Walton requested a paternity test after the child's birth to confirm he was the father. Sabrina's refusal to undergo the test hinted at her uncertainty about the child's paternity, which could have secured her substantial regular payments. Instead of accepting the proposed allowance, Sabrina demanded that Walton double the amount. When Walton refused, she launched a campaign against him. Taking to social media, Sabrina made false accusations that Walton was obsessed with her, extremely jealous of Maduni, and had even threatened them physically. She claimed that Walton had broken into their home, assaulted Maduni, traumatized their children, and sexually assaulted her in violent ways. However, her allegations were unfounded, as Walton had a solid alibi, having been in the United States since their breakup. After Walton sued her for defamation and the police threatened to take action, Sabrina stopped making accusations against her ex-boyfriend. Sabrina settled in Ossembledon, southwest London, with Maduni and their 2 children, and it seemed as though the conflict had been resolved. However, Sabrina, who was not accustomed to managing household chores and found it challenging to care for 2 children, decided to hire a nanny who could also help with the housework. She posted an online job advertisement and conducted personal interviews, but most candidates did not meet her expectations, and those who did not stay long in her household. A young French woman, Sophie Léon, responded to the job advertisement. Because Sophie was in her hometown in France at the time, the interview was conducted via video call. The 19-year-old modestly agreed to all the terms, taking care of a child, helping with household chores, and cooking, in exchange for a symbolic weekly wage of 50 British pounds, including full board and lodging with her future employer. Born on January 7, 1996, in Troyes, a small town between Oise and Sens, Sophie grew up in a humble family. Her parents, Catherine and Patrick Léon, were ordinary workers struggling to make ends meet. After completing her education, Sophie earned a diploma in childcare, but she didn't want to work in her hometown. Instead, she dreamed of moving to a big city. Known for her kind and open-hearted nature, Sophie was loved by those who knew her. She was shy, quiet, and plain in appearance, and wore glasses due to poor vision, which made her a bit self-conscious. During their conversation, Sabrina identified Sophie, who seemed ordinary and unremarkable, as the perfect person to manipulate. Sophie was keen to gain experience and good references, so she was willing to work for very little money. To Sophie, Sabrina appeared to be a serious and trustworthy employer, which she mentioned to her parents before leaving for London. At first, everything seemed to go smoothly for Sophie Léonette, who innocently believed that working for the Kuyders would be a great way to start her nanny career. She quickly formed a close bond with the children, completed her household chores as specified in her contract, and had sufficient time and resources to improve her English language skills and explore the city's attractions. This peaceful period lasted for several months, and all appeared to be going well. Problems arose when Maduni lost his job, leaving the family with only one stable source of income: the monthly child support payments from Walton. Sabrina then demanded that Walton increase these payments, but he requested a DNA test to confirm his paternity first. As a result, the family struggled financially, finding it hard to afford their rent and basic necessities. Sabrina, who was unwilling to give up her luxuries and determined to maintain her socialite lifestyle, became increasingly irritable and aggressive, often taking her frustrations out on the young nanny. With their remaining funds, the couple attempted to start a bakery business, but it failed. Sabrina then turned to Walton, asking for a large sum of money to launch her clothing line, but he categorically refused. This led to tears and complaints from Sabrina about poverty. Sabrina frequently vented to Léonette about her ex-lover, and the nanny tried to console her employer. One theory claims Sabrina Kuyder masterminded a blackmail plot targeting Walton. She allegedly planned to frame Sophie as Walton's partner in crime and lover, planted in their home to cause chaos and put their children in danger. Sabrina supposedly believed Walton was using Sophie as a tool for revenge, motivated by the nanny's supposed infatuation with him. Kuyder allegedly wanted to record Sophie's fabricated confessions and present them to the police as evidence, which would be enough to demand compensation from Walton for his alleged wrongdoing. However, Sophie refused to give false statements on camera. An alternative theory, as argued by Kuyder's lawyers in court, suggests that due to her mental health issues, Sabrina genuinely believed in her conspiracy theory, viewing Sophie as an enemy and a threat to her family. According to this version, Sabrina didn't coerce the nanny into giving false testimony. Instead, she sincerely believed Sophie was Walton's accomplice, infiltrating their household to harm them. Sophie's life rapidly deteriorated into a living hell. She was housed in a wealthy home, but it felt like a torture chamber in the basement. At first, her employers piled extra work on her without a pay rise. Soon she was trapped in a relentless routine of chores from dawn till late at night, leaving her no personal time or freedom to leave the house. To make matters worse, her salary was stopped, and her passport was confiscated to prevent her from escaping or returning to France, effectively holding her captive. Her family contact was strictly monitored. The situation only got worse. Sophie was hardly fed and was coerced into making false accusations against Walton, a man she had never met or known. Her communication was limited to screams, insults, and threats, with accusations of theft flying her way. She was warned that she would be imprisoned if she refused to comply with their demands against the musician. Kuijters used brutal tactics when threats failed. Sophie was confined to a cold basement, given scarce food, and physically abused. She grew weak and emaciated. Slaps and hair-pulling escalated to violent assaults, including a broken nose. The beatings became daily, with new cruelties designed to inflict pain. The London house basement became a torture chamber with no escape. In 2017, Sabrina took Sophie Leon, a malnourished and abused 21-year-old nanny, to a police station to testify against Mark Walton. However, when questioned, Sophie remained silent. The police, instead of helping her, allowed everyone to leave despite her obvious signs of abuse, including weighing under 88 pounds, hair loss, a missing tooth, and a limp. In mid-September 2017, Sophie Leon called her mother, Catherine, in tears, confessing that she wanted to return home but lacked the money to do so. Catherine reassured Sophie that she would buy her a ticket and told her to pack her bags immediately. Sadly, this was the last time Catherine would ever hear her daughter's voice. Just a few days later, on the evening of September 20th, 2017, the authorities were alerted by the Kuijters' neighbors, who had noticed a fire in the yard. What alarmed them was not the fire itself, but the overpowering, sweetly greasy smell it emitted, which one neighbor likened to the smell of burning flesh and hair, combined with something unidentifiable. The thick smoke lingered, leaving a putrid stench on clothes and skin. When firefighters and police arrived, the homeowners, who seemed strangely calm and oblivious to the reason for the emergency visit, met them after extinguishing the fire. A charred human hand was discovered in the ashes. The couple was promptly arrested, and heavily burned human remains were recovered from the fire. Although the gender and age of the deceased could not be determined initially, the body was eventually identified as Sophie Leonette, recognizable due to the melted metal frame of her distinctive glasses, which were found fused to her skull. The investigation into Sophie Leon's cause of death was highly complex due to the severe fire damage to her body. Despite these challenges, forensic experts discovered evidence of extreme physical abuse, including multiple rib fractures, jaw damage, and blunt force trauma to her skull and limbs, indicating she sustained these injuries while still alive. Further examination revealed missing teeth and severe nose damage, suggesting Sophie endured prolonged and intense beatings, resulting in broken bones and knocked-out teeth. Disturbing video recordings found in the house exposed the sadistic nature of her captors, who tortured and coerced Sophie into confessing to colluding with Walton and intending to harm the children. The videos showed her being beaten with objects such as fists, an iron cord, and a golf club, as well as being subjected to electric shock torture. Additionally, she was humiliated, forced to submerge her head in a toilet until she began to suffocate. Experts believe it is likely that Sophie died from asphyxiation before being burned, sparing her from the agony of being alive during the burning. Sabrina Kuijter and Wissam Medouni denied any wrongdoing and displayed no regret for their heinous act. After killing their nanny, Medouni went to a nearby supermarket where he purchased firelighter fluid to burn the body and groceries for his family's dinner, behaving as if nothing untoward had occurred. In March 2018, the court proceedings against the ruthless duo commenced. Sabrina attempted to depict herself as a victim, alleging that Mark Walton's constant harassment had pushed her into a pathological state. However, medical evaluations revealed that although Sabrina suffered from mental health issues, she was not insane and had full awareness of her actions. Wissam, who was physically fit, was psychologically dependent on Sabrina, submitting to her will and obeying her blindly. On June 26, 2018, the court delivered a guilty verdict to the couple, convicting them of torturing, humiliating, and murdering their nanny in exceptionally cruel circumstances. The court handed down life imprisonment sentences with the possibility of parole only after 30 years. Notwithstanding this, both defendants refused to accept responsibility for their actions and instead appealed to reduce their sentences. Sabrina even attempted to fake mental illness to be transferred from prison to a hospital, but this ploy was unsuccessful. Mark Walton, who attended the trial, was overcome with remorse for his ex-partner's brutal actions, which were driven by a warped desire for his attention and financial gain. He offered his heartfelt condolences to the victims' parents and spontaneously pledged a substantial donation to support the grief-stricken family. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Ryan Widmer. Ryan Widmer, a young athlete, was convicted of a horrific crime and is serving a life sentence with parole eligibility in 2025, over 10 years after the tragedy occurred. He is now fighting to overturn his conviction. The case has garnered widespread public attention across 3 neighboring states, sparking controversy surrounding his guilt. The unusual circumstances of Sarah Widmer's death and the lack of a clear motive for the crime have made this case highly controversial. Ryan and Sarah met at a local cafe they both frequented. When Ryan ordered a cup of coffee, Sarah noticed a book on his table that she had recently read. This shared interest in literature sparked a conversation that lasted several hours, covering topics such as books, movies, music, and their common interests. As they learned more about each other, they discovered a shared love for nature, traveling, and animals. With each successive meeting, their relationship grew closer and more trusting, eventually blossoming into true love. After a few months, Ryan and Sarah's relationship blossomed, and he proposed to her during a romantic dinner at the same cafe where they first met. Overjoyed, Sarah accepted his proposal. The young couple set a wedding date and began searching for a beautiful 2-story house in Hamilton. On April 10, 2008, they exchanged vows in a quaint and intimate church ceremony, surrounded by their closest friends and family. Sarah brought every detail to life, making the day truly unforgettable. She stunned in her white dress, leaving Ryan spellbound. Following the grand banquet, which was met with thunderous applause and joyful cheers, they embarked on a 2-week honeymoon to the Hawaiian Islands, where they reveled in each other's company and the breathtaking natural beauty. The young couple, deeply in love, had made plans for a future together, filled with hopes and dreams of starting a family. However, fate had other plans. On Monday, August 11, 2008, after Sarah finished her shift at the dental clinic, she met Ryan at her favorite cafe. They had dinner together, engaging in lively conversation, and afterwards walked home, where Sarah began sorting out the groceries she had bought. She then sat down on the couch, and Ryan handed her a glass of water and a pill, as she had complained of a headache during dinner. They spent the rest of the evening watching their favorite TV show, exchanging gentle kisses, and eventually, Sarah headed upstairs to the bedroom. She undressed, neatly folding her clothes, prepared a towel, lit scented candles, and put on her favorite music. Meanwhile, Ryan stayed downstairs, flipping channels on the TV remote, briefly stopping at a soccer game and lying on the couch for about 10 minutes. He called out to Sarah over the soft music, but she didn't respond. Ryan slowly made his way upstairs, entered the bedroom, and turned on the TV. He called out to Sarah again, but was met with silence. Panic started to set in, and he rushed to the bathroom, where he found Sarah lying face down in the tub. Ryan immediately pulled the plug and grabbed the phone to call emergency services. At 10:49 p.m., the service recorded the call, with Ryan frantically yelling that his wife had drowned in the bathtub, likely having fallen asleep. In his panic, Ryan failed to follow the dispatcher's instructions, wasting precious time. Under the dispatcher's careful guidance, Ryan eventually managed to pull Sarah out of the tub and performed CPR on her repeatedly. The ambulance, accompanied by police officers, arrived at the Widmer home just 6 minutes after the call. The police were initially drawn to the scene of the tragedy. Upon inspection, the bathroom appeared clean and dry, with no signs of water or scattered supplies that would indicate a hasty removal of a body from the water. The bathroom was meticulously clean. Sarah lay on the bedroom floor, nude with dry skin, but her wet hair suggested drowning. The bedroom was also tidy, leading law enforcement to suspect murder. Ryan, wearing only his underwear, was thrashing about the bedroom. When medical professionals found no pulse, they began performing cardiopulmonary resuscitation. A pinkish-white discharge from Sarah's nose and mouth confirmed drowning. Medical staff attempted to intubate Sarah twice as she lay on the bedroom floor, but both attempts failed. She was then rushed to an ambulance, where 2 more attempts were made to revive her heart using a defibrillator, again without success. Throughout the ordeal, Ryan remained by his wife's side, visibly distraught and anxious, as described by medical staff. Within 20 minutes of arriving at the hospital, medical staff attempted to revive Sarah, but at 11:41 p.m., an emergency physician pronounced her dead. Ryan, overcome with grief, fell to his knees in the hospital hallway and wept. The sudden tragedy that occurred just 4 months after the wedding sent shockwaves throughout the city, and Ryan became the prime suspect in the murder of his young wife. Ryan's initial statement, given at the hospital, raised doubts about its accuracy. He claimed that only he and his wife were at home, and that nothing out of the ordinary had happened. They had dinner at a cafe, returned home, and watched TV together. Sarah had a headache, and he gave her painkillers and helped her to the bathroom when he found her. However, the emergency call record showed that the victim was lying face down, contradicting Ryan's account. The man was distraught, repeatedly calling out for Sarah. Under pressure from the investigator, Ryan shifted from being a victim to a participant in the investigation, working to uncover what had happened to Sarah that night. He agreed to let investigators search their house. Analysis of the medication Sarah took revealed it was a common painkiller, but it was discovered that Sarah's frequent headaches and migraines had led her to take a course of drugs that altered her hormonal balance, causing uncontrollable sleep. This became the initial theory behind Sarah's death. After searching the house, police found bloodstains on the carpet. When they arrived, the bathtub was dry and there were no wet towels. The tile floor was also dry and clean, leading police to suspect that Sarah had been murdered. No wet items, clothing, or other objects were found in the house that could have been used to soak up water. Ryan's statements during the 911 call and at the hospital were contradictory, which raised suspicions and turned him from a victim into a suspect. An examination of Sarah's body revealed bruises on her forehead, neck, armpit, and upper lip, as well as lacerations on her upper lip. However, there was no clear evidence of a struggle, as her fingernails were not broken or chipped, and there were no marks on her hands, elbows, or knees. Ryan's body also showed no signs of injury or struggle. An investigation by Sheriff Bishop was inconclusive, as all the bathroom supplies were in place, and there were no signs of resistance. It was unclear whether Sarah had taken a bath that evening, or if she had not resisted and allowed her husband to drown her. Sarah's autopsy, led by Dr. Russell Apt Grove, revealed that the cause of death was drowning, accompanied by multiple muscle hemorrhages in the front of her neck and contusions on her scalp. These injuries, which occurred before her death, raised many questions, but their origin remained unknown. The investigation struggled to make progress with no leads or answers. The toxicology tests found no traces of illicit or alcoholic substances in Sarah's blood. On August 13, 2008, Ryan was arrested on suspicion of aggravated murder of his wife. The decision was based on the discrepancies in the emergency call and the crime scene, as well as the injuries found on Sarah's body. This evidence was sufficient to charge him with her murder by drowning. Despite Ryan and Sarah's seemingly perfect relationship, with friends and neighbors testifying to their deep love for each other, and their public displays of affection, no one could understand what drove them to such a tragic end. In March 2009, The first court hearing took place. Ron Cronenberger, the emergency dispatcher who received the call, testified as a witness. He described Ryan as remaining calm during their conversation, stating that it seemed like Ryan was pretending to perform CPR by blowing into the tube. The prosecution argued that the 911 call, the crime scene, and Sarah's injuries provided sufficient evidence to prove Ryan's guilt. They alleged that Ryan had forcibly drowned Sarah by holding her underwater in a bathtub. The bathtub was a crucial piece of evidence in the case. Upon examination, police found fingerprint streaks, supposedly left by human hands, closer to the middle of the tub. Using a reflected ultraviolet imaging process, fingerprints and smears were detected on the tub. A forearm print was identified, and a hair follicle test revealed that it was left by an adult male, although the exact age of the print could not be determined. However, the bathtub was not the critical evidence needed to prove the struggle between Ryan and Sarah. The prosecution suggested to the jury that a violent altercation likely occurred that night at the Widmer home for unknown reasons, and that the suspect deliberately kept quiet about it. The defense team called in an expert to testify that it is highly unlikely for someone to fall asleep and drown in a bathtub unless they were under the influence of illegal drugs or alcohol. The expert explained that the sensation of water on the face would normally wake a person up or trigger a gag reflex, causing them to cough or choke. Even if the person didn't wake up, the lack of oxygen would eventually rouse them. The pathologist who performed the autopsy testified that if Sarah's body was dry but her hair was wet, it could indicate that her head was forcibly pushed off the edge of a bathtub, toilet, or sink. This could have happened while her head was facing forward or backward, whether the water was running or the bathtub was full. The prosecution argued that Ryan held Sarah's head underwater until she drowned, making him guilty of the crime. On the other hand, the defense argued that Ryan was innocent, primarily because there was no clear motive for the alleged crime. They pointed out that if there had been a violent struggle, as the prosecution claimed, there would be evidence of it. However, there were no injuries on Ryan, and Sarah's fingernails showed no signs of breaking or chipping, suggesting that there was no struggle. They claimed that the injuries found on Sarah were caused by the prolonged CPR, direct cardiac massage, and repeated intubation attempts made that night at the house, in the ambulance, and at the hospital. At the defense's request, Dr. Werner Spitz performed a second autopsy on Sarah. He confirmed that the cause of death was drowning and observed injuries to her neck, arms, upper lip, skull, a lacerated liver, and bleeding on her neck. However, he couldn't determine whether these injuries occurred during CPR. It was argued that the EMTs tried to resuscitate Sarah for about 45 minutes and that the deep neck bleeding likely resulted from an IV inserted in that area. The EMTs had been unable to access her arm veins. Instead of ruling it a homicide, Dr. Spitz concluded that Sarah's death was undetermined. The defense based their case on the fact that Sarah's skin was dry, which dries faster than her hair. They conducted experiments to demonstrate that when Ryan found his wife unconscious, he instinctively pulled the drain plug to try and help her and then called emergency services. This sequence of events explains why her body was drier than expected. The water had already drained from the bathtub by the time Ryan called 911. An expert witness demonstrated that a person can dry off in as little as 7 minutes after emerging from the water. A second court hearing was set for May 2010. Ryan's father, Gary, claimed that the prosecution had obtained DNA results showing that Sarah had the disease, but the prosecutor refused to disclose them, believing they wouldn't have changed the jury's verdict. However, it remains uncertain whether the jury's decision would have been different if they had received reliable evidence about Sarah's medical condition, which could have contributed to her drowning. The official reason for denying a retrial was the jury's errors in their investigation. Despite another unsuccessful court hearing, Ryan remained incarcerated. The Widmer family received an unwelcome shock when Jennifer Cruz arrived at the prosecutor's office to testify against Ryan, claiming he was guilty. She identified herself as a friend of Ryan's, stating that they had regular communication via phone or email. According to Jennifer, Ryan contacted her on October 26, 2009 at 11:09 p.m., and his voice was highly distressed. He confided in her, saying that he had assaulted Sarah in the living room on the day she died. The trigger for the altercation was Sarah's discovery of Ryan's infidelity, leading to a prolonged argument that started downstairs and continued in the bedroom. Ryan pushed Sarah into the bathroom, leaving her without checking on her well-being. After calming down, he found Sarah floating lifelessly in the full bathtub. In an attempt to cover his tracks, Ryan allegedly wiped the water from the bathroom floor using towels and concocted a story about the accident. However, Ryan's defense team vigorously disputed Jennifer's testimony, pointing out several inconsistencies. The lawyers argued that Jennifer's account was implausible, as no wet towels were found anywhere in the house, including the dryer. Furthermore, there was no evidence of infidelity in Ryan and Sarah's marriage. The family was financially stable, and they never quarreled. Ryan's friends described him as a kind, helpful, and even-tempered person who never displayed anger. Additionally, Ryan stood to gain nothing from Sarah's death, as they did not have a life insurance policy. Before the third trial, Jennifer Cruz's credibility was called into question, and she was prevented from testifying as a witness. This was partly due to evidence of her past infidelities and petty theft convictions. Additionally, a phone call in which Ryan allegedly confessed to her was not corroborated. In January 2011, a new trial was held, prompted by the discovery of fresh evidence. The defense presented a medical opinion suggesting that Sarah's sudden loss of consciousness and subsequent drowning might have been caused by her underlying medical condition. Medical experts testified that Sarah's existing cardiac or neurological defects could have led to her losing consciousness, but the state's medical experts disputed these claims. Sarah's co-workers revealed that she often slept in her car before starting her shift at the dental clinic, and that she frequently suffered from allergies and stomach pains. On the day of her death, Sarah mentioned to her co-worker, Dr. Benjamin Mesmer, that she was experiencing a headache and stomach pain. Later that evening, a friend spoke with Sarah, observing that she looked extremely tired and complained of a headache and neck pain. Sarah's friends were aware of her ability to fall asleep easily in unexpected places, with one even speculating that she might have had narcolepsy. However, Sarah's mother testified that her daughter did not have any sleep disorders and was a healthy child who regularly underwent medical examinations, which showed she was in perfect health. The defense argued that Sarah's death was not caused by forced drowning because she didn't have any injuries to the small bones of her neck or defensive wounds on her arms and legs. Although the defense couldn't explain how Sarah died, an emergency medicine expert testified that every year, approximately 300,000 people die suddenly in the United States, and in about 33% of those cases, autopsy results are normal and show no underlying medical conditions. After deliberating for 12 hours, the jury found Ryan guilty of murder and sentenced him to 15 years in prison. Basing their decision on the fact that Sarah's body was not wet, Ryan's past history, and their belief that he had staged his 911 call. Ryan's family has passionately defended him, and the case, which dates back over 10 years, continues to unite like-minded individuals who hope to clear his name through DNA testing. While genetic material often plays a crucial role in resolving disputed charges and exonerations in cases involving unexplained deaths, what sets this case apart is the unusual request for the victim's DNA, rather than the person convicted. Unfortunately, a Warren County judge has already rejected Ryan Widmer's request to have the victim's DNA tested. Mike Allen, a former Hamilton prosecutor, noted that after listening to all 3 trials, he never found a clear motive, which is unusual in a murder case. However, the prosecutor is not required to prove motive, which makes this case even more peculiar. Ryan Widmer is awaiting a federal court decision on a motion for his release. He has been imprisoned for 14 years, and his first opportunity for release will be in July 2025 unless a federal judge rules in his favor. According to University of Cincinnati law professor Donald Custer, who also works with the Ohio Innocence Project, proving innocence is not enough to be exonerated. There must be evidence of a constitutional error in the judicial process. In 2025, Widmer will be eligible for parole, but his lawyers believe it's unlikely he'll be granted parole because the parole board tends to favor inmates who express remorse. To our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Kelsey Turner. Kelsey Turner was born on March 5, 1993, in Norfolk, Virginia, to Samantha Ingram, a would-be model and dancer, and Christopher Ingram, a laborer. As the second child, she grew up with her older brother Colin. Shortly after her birth, the family moved to Jonesboro, Arkansas, where Kelsey spent most of her childhood. After her parents divorced a few years later, her father returned to Virginia and lost contact with his former wife and children. Kelsey developed into a stunning beauty with a perfect figure, ideal for modeling. She wasn't interested in school, preferring to attend parties, go on dates, and participate in events. Her dream was to become famous, feature on magazine covers, give interviews, and walk the red carpet. Although she lacked talent, her youth and good looks were her biggest assets. In high school, Kelsey began attending modeling castings with her mother Samantha's strong support. Samantha had once aspired to be a model herself and was enthusiastic about her daughter's endeavors. However, Kelsey only managed to secure a couple of shoots for clothing catalogs. At 18, Kelsey married Judy Turner when she was already pregnant. Shortly after, she gave birth to a daughter named Beverly. However, their marriage was brief and ended in divorce by the time she was 20. After abandoning her runway modeling career, Kelsey decided to pursue a career as a men's magazine model. She created a portfolio featuring provocative photos and submitted them to various publications, which quickly caught the attention of several men's magazines. Kelsey viewed this as the start of a promising career and her path to a glamorous, carefree lifestyle, which she had always aspired to. Over the next few years, she regularly received offers for photo shoots. She enthusiastically gave interviews, attended events, and attempted to establish valuable connections. Notable highlights of her career included one-off shoots for Playboy and Maxim, as well as a photo session and interview with 110 magazine. For these opportunities, she traveled to Los Angeles and Las Vegas. In an interview, Kelsey candidly described herself, stating that she was a blonde with a curvy figure and a slim waist, and asked what more one would need for happiness. She also shared that she enjoyed partying, spending time with friends, and living life to the fullest, believing that life is short and should be lived beautifully and joyfully. Kelsey was not overly concerned about her future, frequently changed partners, and quickly spent the money she earned or received from admirers. At 23, Kelsey had another child, a son named Josh, but the father refused to acknowledge him or marry her. As her modeling career declined, Kelsey turned to social media to build a following. She regularly posted provocative photos of herself in swimsuits, lingerie, and revealing outfits, which were heavily edited to make her look like a Barbie doll. She also shared pictures of herself at trendy boutiques, nightclubs, and popular entertainment venues, creating an illusion of a luxurious and carefree life. However, behind this facade, Kelsey, a single mother of 2 young children, was struggling to make ends meet. She didn't know how to manage her finances wisely and spent all her money as soon as she got it. In 2016, Kelsey faced a serious crisis after an incident involving her daughter, who was left traumatized and became withdrawn and mute, despite being physically unharmed. The incident led to therapy sessions with Dr. Thomas Burchard, a renowned child psychiatrist in Monterey, California, which ultimately contributed to a tragic event years later. Dr. Thomas Kirk Burchard was born in Boston, Massachusetts on February 16, 1948, to a family of a prominent architect and engineer. His family later moved to Virginia, where his father taught at Harvard and the Architectural College at the Technological Institute. Thomas spent his childhood and youth in Virginia. Unlike his father, Thomas chose a career in medicine, specifically child psychology. After graduating from medical school and completing his thesis, Thomas worked as a pediatric psychiatry resident in several prestigious hospitals and lectured at colleges nationwide. Eventually, Dr. Burchard was employed at a public clinical hospital on the Monterey Peninsula in California, where he worked for over 40 years as a highly sought-after pediatric psychiatrist. Dr. Burchard was a highly respected doctor with a reputation for connecting with his young patients and taking on the toughest cases. He had a doctorate from the University of California, Berkeley, and an impressive academic record with over 300 scientific publications, cited nearly 40,000 times, giving him an H-index of 81. He was also known for his kindness, responsiveness, and generosity, particularly towards his young patients from low-income families. He even paid for hospital treatments for sick children and assisted single mothers. Dr. Burchard lived with a woman named D.Y., who was described as his assistant, housekeeper, lover, or fiancée. She was close to him and the first to notice changes in his behavior, which suggested early signs of dementia or Alzheimer's disease. As he approached his 70th birthday, Dr. Burchard became increasingly forgetful, absent-minded, and inattentive. To cope, he kept detailed diaries and notebooks to record everything, including names, dates, and events, to avoid confusion. He always carried a notebook with him containing sensitive information like banking details, account numbers, passwords, and card pins. Dr. Thomas Burchard's trusting nature led him to increase his financial support to those in need from hundreds to thousands of dollars. Kelsey Turner took advantage of Dr. Burchard's generosity. During her first visit with her daughter, she tearfully told the doctor that as a single mother of two, she couldn't afford his expensive services. Feeling empathetic, Dr. Burchard offered to treat her child for free and even gave her $300 to help with her children's needs. Kelsey was surprised, but soon realized that by sharing fabricated, tearful stories about her struggles, she could extract more money from the elderly doctor. At their next session, she concocted a performance, tearfully describing her younger son's illness and claiming she couldn't afford his expensive medication. This time, she specified a fake amount, and Dr. Burchard gave it to her in full. Kelsey's luck had changed, and from that point on, she frequently fabricated emotional stories to extract large sums of money from the trusting older man. Instead of using the money to support her children, she spent it on her own leisure activities, luxury clothing, and beauty treatments. Unwilling to return to her hometown in Virginia, Kelsey convinced Thomas to pay for her rental housing in California, claiming it would be easier to find a job and the climate was better for her children. It didn't take much persuasion for the doctor to agree, and he paid for the apartment. There were whispers that Kelsey and Thomas were romantically involved, and that this was the reason the respected doctor accommodated her every request. While these whispers may have held some truth, Kelsey maintained that Thomas had a paternal affection for her and her children, and was helping them selflessly. This was supported in court by Judy, although she added that Kelsey shamelessly took advantage of the doctor's kindness and his declining mental state due to dementia. Thomas paid for Kelsey's rental housing, bills, and gave her large sums of cash for necessities. He also rented a luxurious Mercedes-Benz convertible for her, rather than a practical family vehicle suitable for transporting children safely. As Kelsey's modeling career came to an end, her youth faded, and she stopped receiving offers for photo shoots. But instead of getting a job, she relied on her wealthy benefactor, Thomas, for financial support. Over nearly 3 years, Kelsey tried to break free from Thomas, blackmailing and threatening him. Despite this, he spent around $500,000 on her and her children. However, Kelsey wasted all the money on luxuries, including breast augmentation and liposuction, hoping to revive her modeling career. She prioritized partying over her children, neglecting them in the process. As a result, her ex-husband gained sole custody of their daughter through the court, stripping Kelsey of her parental rights. She was left with only her younger son, whose father had never shown interest in his child. Thomas was furious when he discovered what was happening, not because of the girl's ex-husband, but because of Kelsey's behavior. He realized she was a neglectful mother who didn't care for her children and spent all the money meant for them on her own desires, entertainment, and clothes. Dr. Burchard decided to have a serious talk with Kelsey, telling her he would no longer fund her extravagant and idle lifestyle. In response, Kelsey threatened to spread false rumors that the respected child psychiatrist had inappropriate, intimate interests in his young patients. Although this was a lie, any gossip on the matter could severely damage the doctor's reputation. Reluctantly, Burchard agreed to Kelsey's terms and continued to transfer money and pay her bills. In early 2019, Kelsey decided to move to Las Vegas with her son, intending to revive her modeling career. As usual, she expected Thomas, whom she continued to blackmail, to finance this venture. The doctor rented a house that Kelsey had chosen and transferred the amount of money she requested. After this, Kelsey disappeared for 2 months without giving any sign of her whereabouts. In late February 2019, Kelsey resurfaced because she was running out of money. She called Thomas, crying, and told him about her severe illness, inability to work, and struggle to provide for her son. However, when the doctor refused to help, Kelsey's tone changed abruptly, and she began threatening and blackmailing him again. It's crucial to highlight that Judy had been pushing Dr. Burchard for a while to report Kelsey to the authorities, exposing her blackmail and extortion attempts. Judy also recommended getting Child Protective Services involved, considering Kelsey's past, having already lost parental rights to her older daughter, and her inability to properly care for her young son. Anticipating a potential court case, Dr. Burchard took steps to ensure he had the backing of his colleagues, keeping them informed about the situation and securing their promises of support. To persuade Kelsey to leave Thomas alone, Judy previously tried talking to her directly, but Kelsey responded with threats of retaliation. This time, Dr. Burchard decided to travel to Las Vegas to verify Kelsey's claims, knowing what he would likely find. Judy attempted to discourage him from going, but the elderly man was resolute. She then advised him to bring her or one of his friends along, but Thomas insisted that this was a personal matter that he needed to resolve on his own. Dr. Burchard set out on his journey on March 1st, 2019. On the morning of March 7th, a group of tourists driving through Nevada took a detour from the main highway onto a dirt road leading to Lake Mead. They stumbled upon a solitary Mercedes-Benz convertible parked in the middle of the desert with its windows up and roof closed, but no one in sight. The tourists found this suspicious and decided to investigate. As they approached the vehicle, they noticed one of the windows was shattered. Upon peering inside, they discovered signs of a violent struggle with bloodstains throughout the interior. The tourists promptly reported their disturbing discovery to the police. Law enforcement officers arrived at the scene around noon, greeted by an overwhelming stench of decay under the scorching sun. The source of the odor was quickly located when they opened the trunk of the car. Beneath a pile of items and rags, they found the lifeless body of an elderly man, next to whom lay a blood-stained baseball bat. It was later confirmed that the body belonged to Dr. Burchard, who had been missing for 5 days. Judy had reported his disappearance on March 2nd, when she couldn't reach him at their scheduled time, and she immediately feared the worst. She contacted the police, hoping against hope that he would be found alive. Tragically, that was not the case. The autopsy revealed a horrific series of injuries on the elderly man's body. He had sustained multiple abrasions, bruises, and superficial cuts. The examination also showed that he had suffered severe head injuries, likely inflicted by the baseball bat found beside him in the trunk. Part of his ear had been severed, and his hands bore numerous cuts, suggesting a desperate attempt to defend himself. Additionally, there were bruises on his face with a peculiar imprinted pattern. The most shocking discovery, however, was that the man had been placed in the trunk while still alive, where he slowly suffocated under the intense desert sun. As the police investigated the crime scene, they discovered that the car was rented in Kelsey Turner's name, making her the prime suspect. Judy provided the authorities with the address of the house where the blonde lived and where the deceased doctor had gone, as it was also rented in his name. However, when the police arrived, they found the house empty. Inside, they noticed scattered containers of cleaning agents and a strong smell of household chemicals, indicating a hasty attempt to erase any evidence of the crime. The house had been occupied by Turner, her 4-year-old son, her new boyfriend John Logan Kennison, and 2 neighbors, Diana Pina and Jeremy Eric. Since they had all fled, they became suspects, as it seemed unlikely that the petite blonde could have inflicted such severe injuries on the doctor or moved his body to the car trunk alone. The police managed to interview Jeremy, who recalled that he and his girlfriend had left the house while the doctor was still alive and unharmed. According to Jeremy, his girlfriend had drunk too much and flirted with the doctor, trying to get a few $100s, similar to Kelsey's tactics. This had enraged Kelsey, who accused the woman of trying to steal her boyfriend. The 2 women almost got into a fight, and Jeremy had to quickly take his girlfriend away from the house. He hadn't returned for several days and was unaware of the subsequent events. Police discovered that Dr. Burchard habitually carried a notebook containing bank account details and passwords, but frequently misplaced it. Following his murder, the notebook went missing, and substantial sums were withdrawn from 2 of his accounts on March 3rd. The authorities promptly blocked the accounts and cards, and on March 21st, Kelsey and her boyfriend JN were apprehended in Stockton, California, after a second attempt to withdraw funds. Prior to their arrest, the couple, accompanied by their child, had been evading detection by hiding in motels, constantly changing their location and paying in cash. They later expressed regret for not completely depleting Burchard's accounts initially, and subsequently planned to empty them and flee to Mexico with the money. However, by the time they made their second attempt, the authorities had already blocked the accounts, leading to their capture. According to Diana, after Jeremy and his girlfriend left, a heated argument broke out between Turner and Dr. Burchard. This was triggered by the doctor's refusal to give Turner another cent. In a fit of rage, Turner threatened to ruin Dr. Burchard's reputation by spreading false rumors about his behavior with his young patients. As the situation escalated and Turner became physically aggressive, Dr. Burchard locked himself in a room for safety. However, JN forced open the door and violently attacked the elderly doctor with a bat, causing a severe hematoma and a nosebleed. Diana intervened, begging everyone to calm down. Upon seeing Dr. Burchard's condition, she urged them to take him to the hospital, worried about the consequences of their actions. Before they left, Dr. Burchard promised Diana that he would report to the police that he was attacked and robbed by strangers. The 4 of them then drove to the garage, where Dr. Burchard was seated in the back of the car. Kelsey instructed Diana to return to the house and thoroughly clean up, making sure to remove all traces of blood. Diana started cleaning as told, but heard Dr. Burchard's cries from the garage. Rushing back, she saw Kelsey and Kennison brutally attacking him, trapping him in the car. It was clear they never meant to take him to the hospital, but planned to kill him with a bat and knife. Diana was forced back to cleaning, fearing for her life. Later, she heard the cars drive away, and only Johns returned with Kelsey. From the start, Diana chose to cooperate with the authorities by agreeing to a plea deal, which meant she would reveal everything she knew about the case. In return, she avoided being charged with being an accomplice and received a relatively light 3-year sentence for tampering with evidence. In contrast, her former lovers refused to take responsibility, and instead blamed each other for the crime. However, it was easy to prove their guilt because they left behind significant evidence in the car, and phone records showed they were in the desert on the night of March 2nd, where the car with the body was abandoned. Kennison was convicted of second-degree homicide and received a 45-year prison sentence with the possibility of parole after 18 years. The situation with Turner was more complicated. After her arrest, she announced that she was pregnant, which significantly delayed her trial. While in prison, she gave birth to a girl, and both the newborn and her son were placed in the care of social services because none of Turner's relatives were willing to take on the responsibility. In January 2023, following her lawyer's advice, Kelsey Turner admitted her guilt and was sentenced to 25 years in prison, with the possibility of parole no earlier than 10 years from the start of her sentence. She is currently serving her sentence at the Florence McClure Women's Correctional Center in Las Vegas. In conclusion, it is worth noting that ABC's documentary series 20th Century aired an episode in February 2023 titled A Model Murder, which detailed the heinous crime committed by Turner and her boyfriend. Welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Vicki Roberts. Vicki Roberts, born Victoria Smith, was born in September 1984 in Cheshire, England. She grew up in a conservative and religious family with an older sister. The sisters attended a Christian school where they developed their musical talents and sang in the choir. Vicki was known for being kind, friendly, and helpful, always willing to lend a hand. After high school, Vicki enrolled in university and worked part-time at an IKEA store to fund her education. That's where she met Michael Roberts, a charismatic and sociable young man who was only a year older than her. Michael was also a student and an athlete who took care of his appearance. Initially, Vicki found Michael too talkative and intrusive, but he eventually won her over with his charming personality. Michael was born in June 1983 in Warrington, Cheshire, to a prominent chemical engineer and his family. As the eldest of two sons, Michael was raised with high expectations and strict discipline. His parents instilled in him the belief that he was destined for greatness, and Michael grew up to be ambitious, driven, and confident. He was a natural socialite, effortlessly making friends and commanding attention with his charismatic personality. His striking appearance, sense of humor, and intellectual curiosity only added to his charm. However, his parents' constant praise and emphasis on his superiority may have contributed to Michael's growing narcissism, which intensified over time. Michael desperately wanted to please his parents, so he strived to be the perfect son and meet their expectations. Meanwhile, Roberts, a womanizer, had a string of girlfriends and mistresses. He was skilled at secretly dating multiple people simultaneously, making each one believe they were the only one. He got a thrill from pursuing girls, particularly those who seemed out of his reach. One such girl was Vicki, who Michael was determined to win over. Initially, she kept him at arm's length, rejecting even his casual invitations to walk together after work or grab coffee. Vicki was a dedicated student and devoted her free time to church activities, leaving no room for dating or romance. It took Michael a few months to convince Vicki to go out with him. He won her over with his charming and sweet nature, showering her with flowers, gifts, and little surprises. He even took her to meet his parents, who adored her and gave their seal of approval for their son's choice. Vicki was convinced of his sincerity and eventually agreed to be his girlfriend. Michael became her first love and for a while, her only one. She was deeply happy with him, and it seemed like destiny had brought them together. Michael, too, seemed to fall in love and was ready to settle down, but their happiness was short-lived. From the outside, their relationship looked perfect. They were both young, attractive, full of energy, ambitious, and had big plans for the future. However, Vicki soon discovered that Michael had an irrepressible sexual appetite and a passion for experimentation in bed. At first, Michael didn't pressure Vicki too much, fearing she would leave him. But once he was confident she wouldn't go anywhere, he revealed his true desires. The modest and religious Vicky was shocked by what was happening, but she was deeply in love with Michael and trusted him. For a long time, she kept their bedroom secrets hidden behind closed doors. Michael made her an official marriage proposal, which she happily accepted. She genuinely believed that after the wedding, her fiancé would stop his extreme experiments. Meanwhile, one of Vicky's closest friends began to notice that she was hiding bruises and small injuries under her clothes. The friend confronted Vicky, asking if her fiancé was abusing her and if she needed help. At first, Vicky denied everything, but eventually admitted that the marks were a result of her fiancé's extreme intimate experiments. Michael had a strong passion for bondage and using various toys and devices. Vicky confided in her friend that they had intimate encounters up to 5 times a day, but Michael still remained unsatisfied. He saw himself as a skilled lover, and intimacy was an art form and a way for him to express himself. Although Michael occasionally made concessions when Vicky refused to participate in some of his dangerous experiments, he usually managed to convince her to go along with his desires. After defending her diploma, Vic found herself facing an unplanned pregnancy, which prompted her to change jobs. She was soon hired as an account manager at a logistics company. Around the same time, Michael left IKEA and began working as a sales consultant at a large retail chain selling electronics. Michael flourished in his new role, leveraging his charisma, communication, and persuasive skills to consistently exceed sales targets. As a result, he quickly rose through the ranks, earning a promotion to senior sales. The management even considered transferring him to the main office, but first he needed to undergo training and improve his qualifications. As Michael attended training sessions and traveled to London for business, he felt proud and accomplished. However, in the process, he began to neglect his young fiancée, Vic. He only seemed to remember her existence when he needed intimacy, and their relationship suffered as a result. They stopped talking, hardly spent time together, and outside of the bedroom, Vic seemed to be invisible to him. Michael started having numerous affairs with co-workers, clients, and mere acquaintances while simultaneously planning his wedding to Vicky. He had an insatiable appetite for intimacy with various women, which boosted his self-esteem and gave him a sense of accomplishment. When Vicky discovered she was pregnant, she excitedly shared the news with Michael, expecting him to expedite their wedding plans. However, Michael's reaction was one of anger and frustration. He insisted that Vicky terminate the pregnancy, citing their young age and the idea that they had their whole lives ahead of them to have children. Vicky was shocked by his demand, but refused to consider abortion, prompting Michael to try to persuade her through other means. Michael convinced the bride, Vicky, that if her religious parents found out she was pregnant and living with him out of wedlock, they would be furious. He promised that they would keep the abortion a secret and have children after they got married. Vicky was torn, but Michael's persuasive nature eventually won her over, and she had the procedure. However, the abortion came with complications, and Vicky spent several days in the hospital, followed by 3 weeks of recovery. The doctor strictly forbade her from having sex during this time, which sent Michael into a rage. It dawned on Vicky that Michael had mental health issues and a sex addiction. Without intimacy, he became unhinged, often leaving the house, claiming he had urgent work matters to attend to. Vicky suspected that Michael was seeking intimacy outside their relationship, but she genuinely believed that everything would change after they got married, and she could help him overcome his infidelity. However, their 2-year engagement revealed a different reality. Michael had no intention of marrying Vicky, as his current situation suited him perfectly. He had a loyal fiancée at home who took care of his household needs, as well as multiple mistresses on the side, whom he regularly replaced. Vicky always took Michael's promises at face value, even when she discovered his infidelity. She forgave him as long as he assured her it was the last time and that he would change. However, as time passed, Vicky began to pressure Michael for marriage, as she wanted a complete family and children. Her parents also increasingly raised this question, but what ultimately pushed the issue was the insistence of Michael's parents, whom he didn't want to disappoint. Vicky was a kind and sweet person whom everyone loved. Her parents-in-law adored her and considered her an ideal match for their son. They were eager to see the couple get married and have grandchildren. With the help of their parents, the couple organized a grand wedding with all the trimmings, including a white dress and a limousine. The newlyweds looked happy and in love, with a long and fulfilling life ahead of them. After the wedding, the couple settled into a large and cozy house in a prestigious area of Warrington, not far from Robert's parents. However, what the relatives didn't know was that Michael had a dark side that Vicky was already well aware of. Despite being married, Michael did not love Vicky and only saw her as a way to appear normal in the eyes of others. Vicky never complained about Michael's infidelities and strange behaviors, and he was able to continue cheating on her without anyone suspecting a thing. At work, Michael was successful, earning promotions and a good salary after being transferred to a new office. Michael's direct supervisor, Carrie Hall, was a 10-year-old older, divorced mother who worked as the head of administration at Phones for You. Despite her busy schedule, she was attractive, well-groomed, and strong-willed as required by her position. For a long time, she ignored the signs of attention from her young subordinate, Michael. However, Michael saw this as a challenge and made a concerted effort to win her over, using his natural charm and eloquence. After about a month, Carrie reciprocated and they began a romantic relationship, secretly meeting in hotel rooms. Carrie described their relationship as turbulent, passionate, and experimental. As a mature, self-confident woman, Carrie was flattered by the attention of a younger man and was open to trying new things. With her, Michael could fulfill his fantasies that he couldn't with his modest wife. Michael frequently deceived his wife by claiming he was working late or attending corporate trainings, when in reality, he was meeting his mistress. He confided in his mistress about his unhappiness in his marriage, calling it a youthful mistake and expressing his willingness to divorce his wife. However, he failed to take action as his wife refused to grant him a divorce. The affair with Carrie lasted over a year, but she didn't pressure him for divorce. Content with their secret hotel trysts, physical marks, and risky games, Carrie, a sports enthusiast who always took pride in her figure, suddenly changed her style after starting a relationship with Michael. She began wearing long-sleeved, high-necked clothes, which was unusual for her. A concerned friend noticed the change and Carrie confided in her about Michael's unusual intimate preferences. She revealed that Michael enjoyed experimenting with rough, controlling behaviors, such as biting, squeezing, and tying her up. Carrie showed her friend the physical marks these activities had left on her body. Although her friend urged her to go to the police, Carrie refused, saying that she had consented to these activities and that Michael usually warned her beforehand. However, she admitted that things sometimes got out of control, like when Michael would strangle her to supposedly enhance her pleasure, causing her to lose consciousness. Despite fearing these strangulation games, Carrie continued to succumb to Michael's persuasion, hoping that he would eventually tire of these cruel experiments or that she would become desensitized to them. Michael's wife and mistresses didn't try to intervene. Before they got married, Vicky had already suspected Michael's infidelity through open letters and a love letter. Despite knowing about his affairs, she believed her love and care could transform him into an exemplary family man. However, after their wedding, the situation deteriorated, and Michael convincingly denied his cheating. Vicky decided to investigate her husband's infidelity by looking through his phone while he was asleep. She was shocked to discover numerous intimate conversations between Michael and Carrie, as well as other girls, including explicit photos. Despite her devastation, Vicky did not want to upset her family, so she kept the discovery to herself and moved in with a friend instead of telling her parents and sister. Before leaving, Vicky wrote a heartfelt letter to Michael, confessing her love for him and acknowledging that he was the central figure in her life. However, she also made it clear that she was aware of his infidelity and would not tolerate it. Vicky informed Michael that she was giving him time to reflect on their relationship, but she would not stay in the marriage if his behavior continued. She wrote the letter by hand and left it on the refrigerator for him to find. Michael didn't feel emotional about the message, nor was he upset by his wife's departure. However, he didn't want to lose the comfort of having a quiet and obedient partner who took care of the household and put up with his quirky behavior and unusual tastes. That same evening, Michael went to Vicky's friend's house, bringing a large bouquet of flowers. He got down on his knees, apologized, and begged Vicky to come back to him, promising to be faithful and making her his one and only. Vicky wanted to believe him and decided to return home, where a new mistress was waiting. Michael didn't stop seeing Carrie, but he became more cautious and even made an effort to come home for dinner, which his wife had carefully prepared. He deleted messages on his phone, changed the password on his social media profiles, and started an affair with a young employee named Karen Wilson, who was engaged to be married. Despite this, Michael pursued Karen relentlessly, making himself out to be a miserable and unhappy lover. He was so drawn to Karen that after 2 months, he decided to end things with 33-year-old Carrie Hall, whom he had grown tired of. Michael told Karen a fabricated story about being unhappy in his marriage and promised to leave his wife soon. Karen eventually gave in, and they became intimate in the office. A week later, she broke off her engagement and waited for Michael to follow through on his promise. Michael didn't plan to divorce Vicky, but he wanted to end their connection and start a new relationship with another woman. To achieve this, he lied to Vicky, telling her that he had already filed for divorce and moved in with his parents. This was a fatal mistake, as Vicky became suspicious that he was still cheating on her. Decided to take action, Vicky waited until Michael was in the shower and took his phone, but she found nothing incriminating because he had deleted all text messages and changed the password on his social media account. Undeterred, Vicky waited until Michael fell asleep and then took his work laptop, where she discovered his account on the social network was still active. On the laptop, she found conversations with his new girlfriend, in which he confessed his love, claimed to be divorcing his wife, and said he was living with his parents. The discovery was a huge shock for Vicky. She took screenshots of the intimate messages as proof of her husband's infidelity and saved them on her laptop. She also found several hotel room receipts in his wallet, which further implicated him. The next morning, Vicky confronted Michael with the evidence, and for the first time in their relationship, she lost her temper. Michael tried to apologize and promised to change, but Vicky threatened to tell his parents everything, hoping they could finally make him see sense. Michael was furious when his wife Vicky threatened to reveal his secrets to his parents. In a fit of rage, he slapped her. Vicky, determined to carry out her threat, got up and headed for the door. Michael caught up with her, grabbed a heavy jewelry box from the dressing table, and hit her twice on the head, knocking her unconscious. Then, he squeezed her throat with his hands until she stopped breathing. With no remorse, Michael wrapped Vicky's lifeless body in a blanket, packed it into several large garbage bags, and carried it to the garage. He then quickly cleaned up the house, removing most of Vicky's belongings. After calling Karen, he invited her over and they had dinner, enjoying themselves in the same house where he had just murdered his wife. The next day, Michael ran off with Karen, leaving behind the scene of his crime. Michael told his parents that his wife had left him for another man. To convince them, he went to their home, cried on his mother's shoulder, and showed her messages on his wife's phone. But what he didn't reveal was that he had sent those messages himself, pretending to be his wife. The messages said that she had lost interest in him met someone else, and wanted to live with this new person. Meanwhile, Michael also sent messages to his wife's parents from her phone, saying that she had fallen in love with someone else, left with him, and asked them not to contact her and give her space. The Smiths, concerned about their daughter Vicky, immediately tried to contact her, but their calls were consistently rejected. In response, they only received messages asking them to give her time, which seemed strange to them. They then decided to visit Michael's house to get some answers, but his story only raised more questions and doubts. When they discovered that Vicky had stopped showing up for work without warning, they became even more worried and decided to file a police report. On December 1st, 2009, the police launched an investigation. It was discovered that Michael had purchased a shovel, rope, rags, and detergents from a hardware store that day, which seemed suspicious. However, he hadn't disposed of the body by the time the police arrived at his home. Although the police didn't find anything incriminating, Michael's behavior and story raised many questions. What was particularly striking was that they overlooked a large package in the corner of the garage. During the initial inspection of the marital home, no signs of the missing woman's clothes, documents, or personal belongings were found, suggesting that she might have voluntarily left. However, Vicky's laptop was discovered in the bedroom, and upon seizing it, the police found screenshots of Michael's conversations with his mistresses, which Vicky had saved. The police then requested a geolocation of Vicky's cell phone, which regularly received messages from her husband and relatives. The search revealed that the phone had been in the marital home the entire time. In a subsequent search of the Roberts home, law enforcement officials made a disturbing discovery in the garage. But just as they were processing this new evidence, Michael suddenly vanished from under their noses, taking a wallet with cash that allowed him to remain hidden for several days. Michael's money ran out, so he turned to one of his mistresses, Lavina T., asking to stay with her for a while. However, one evening, she heard on the news that Michael was wanted for murdering his wife. Without hesitation, she reported his whereabouts to the police, leading to his arrest. When questioned, Michael broke down in tears, claiming he was innocent. He insisted that his wife's death was an accident, resulting from a consensual intimate game where she asked him to strangle her with a rope belt, but he overdid it. However, forensic experts uncovered contradictory evidence. The autopsy revealed that Michael's wife was strangled with bare hands, attacked from behind, and had 2 extensive hematomas on her head that occurred before her death, ruling out any connection to the alleged intimate game. Michael's trial began in January 2010, where he continued to plead innocence and hoped for leniency. Nevertheless, the autopsy results proved that Michael brutally hit his wife twice on the head and then strangled her, hiding her body in the garage. Michael Roberts was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison, but with the possibility of parole after serving 17 years. This means that, if he demonstrates good behavior, he may be eligible for release as early as 2027. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Nancy Paola Reyes. Nancy Paola Reyes Gorsi was born on April 13, 1991, in Granados, Guatemala, to Jorge and Pren Gorsi, a poor family of 7. Despite their financial struggles, her parents were determined to provide their 5 children with a good education, hoping they would have better lives. Nancy excelled in school, which enabled her to enroll in the University of Vilanova, where she earned a degree in business administration and document management with honors. However, her academic achievements did not immediately translate to career success. She worked part-time as a cashier and later became an administrator at a supermarket, but her professional growth stagnated. During her university years, Nancy was in an unregistered marriage with a man whose identity remains private, and they had 2 daughters together. Unfortunately, the relationship ended and the couple separated. The father of the children lost interest in their well-being and failed to provide financial support. Nancy lived with her parents and daughters, working at a supermarket with no clear future prospects. The family struggled financially, barely covering essential expenses. However, Nancy's older sister's decision to immigrate to the US in 2013 changed everything. Her sister found a good job, got married, and settled down, inspiring Nancy to make a similar change. Instead of the US, Nancy chose to relocate to sunny Spain. The problem was that Nancy didn't have enough money to buy a one-way plane ticket, let alone cover initial expenses. So she worked hard for several years, saving diligently until she finally had enough money to make her dream a reality. In July 2018, Nancy bought a ticket to Madrid, promising her parents she would stay in touch to alleviate their worries. Her plan was to find a place to live and a job upon arrival, with a few €1,000 to cover rent, food, and essentials until she could secure a steady income. When Nancy left, she was 27 years old, and her daughters, who stayed with their grandparents in Guatemala, were 7 and 5 years old. After a brief stay in Madrid, Nancy moved to Barcelona and later settled in Cadiz, the capital of the province of Cadiz, Spain. She kept in close touch with her family, calling home almost every day to check in on them and regularly sending money to support them. Over time, her remittances enabled her parents not only to support themselves and her daughters, but also to renovate their old house. Although Nancy didn't have a steady job, she made a living by doing odd jobs like cleaning houses for wealthy families and caring for the elderly and sick. Despite the challenges, Nancy never complained and was optimistic about her decision to move to Europe, where she believed she had more opportunities. She was convinced that she could never have earned as much back in Guatemala, even if she worked non-stop without days off. Nancy was pleased with her new life and even planned to bring her daughters to Spain once she had saved enough to rent a comfortable and spacious home for the whole family. Nancy initially kept her personal life private, citing her busy work schedule as the reason. However, in the spring of 2020, she confided in her parents about meeting Carlos Andres Bustamante, with whom she had begun a romantic relationship. The two had met by chance while Nancy was searching for a new place to live, and as they spent more time together, their relationship blossomed. They eventually moved in together, with Carlos being a year older than Nancy. At the start of their relationship, Carlos didn't have a steady income, relying on small, odd jobs to get by. As a result, Nancy became the primary breadwinner, covering their housing and bills, and often providing financial support for Carlos's personal expenses. Despite this, Nancy never expressed any concerns to her family, leading them to believe that she had found a loving and supportive partner. Nancy's two younger brothers had also relocated to Spain, and she remained in close contact with them, especially Dennis, the youngest, who had met Carlos and found him likable. In June 2020, Nancy and Carlos decided to move to Santander, a resort city on the Atlantic coast. When Nancy spoke with her family, she mentioned that the climate was warmer and there were more job opportunities. However, this was when problems in her relationship with Carlos started to emerge, which she tried to keep hidden. Carlos turned out to be jealous, hot-tempered, and even cruel. He had no career ambitions and was content to be supported by Nancy. Moreover, he struggled with alcohol abuse and occasionally used prohibited substances, despite repeatedly promising to quit and find a stable job. When Nancy discovered she was pregnant, she was already questioning whether to continue her life with Carlos. Carlos was overjoyed by the news and promised that their life would improve, but in reality, things only worsened. He continued to drink and use drugs, taking money from Nancy or asking his mother for it. Worse still, he began physically abusing Nancy, which she tried to conceal from everyone. On the evening of August 12th, a disturbing scene unfolded while Nancy was video chatting with her parents. Her partner, Carlos, suddenly burst into a fit of rage, yelling at Nancy and demanding to know who she was talking to. Refusing to believe her when she told him it was her mother, he snatched the phone from her hands. After verifying the truth by glancing at the screen, he carelessly tossed the device onto a chair and walked away. The very next day, a similar incident occurred. Carlos again wrestled the phone from Nancy's hands while she was speaking with her parents and daughters. He insisted on knowing who she was talking to, hurled insults at her, and even made threats. A terrified Nancy later attempted to downplay the situation to her relatives, attributing Carlos's behavior to excessive jealousy and assuring them that everything was under control. However, her concerned parents urged her to report the incidents to the police, but Nancy insisted on handling the matter herself. On August 17th, Nancy had a concerning phone conversation with her sister. She stated that if anything happened to her, Carlos would be responsible. Although her words were ominous, she didn't explain further, only asking her sister to take care of her children if needed. This was the last time her sister heard from Nancy. Nancy vanished on August 20th around 2 p.m. She sent a text to her father, promising to call later that evening, but she never did. Her family tried contacting Carlos, but he didn't respond either. The situation was alarming because the couple had recently moved to Santander, had no friends there, and Nancy's brothers were on the other side of the country. A few days later, a suspicious message came from Carlos's phone, claiming that he and Nancy had argued and decided to separate. The message stated that Nancy had left to find a new apartment, ignoring his calls, and he had no idea where she was. Nancy's brothers suggested that Carlos come to Ciudad Real to file a missing person report with them. Carlos agreed, but he never showed up, didn't file the report, and ceased communicating with the family. Nancy's relatives reached out to the police to file a report about her disappearance. In the meantime, Nancy's friends provided her brothers with the address of Sandra Bustamante, Carlos's mother. When they visited her, she became emotional and confessed that she had suspected her son might do something harmful to his partner, but she didn't provide any specific details. Sandra also claimed to have no knowledge about the whereabouts of her son and his fiancée. Although Carlos wasn't answering her calls, he sent her brief messages asking her to stop inquiring and to give him some time. Despite liking Nancy, Sandra was aware of her son's capabilities and understood his true nature. Sandra went to the police station the next day for questioning about Nancy's disappearance. She told the officers what she had already shared with Nancy's brothers, Carlos's troubling behavior and a lengthy text message from Nancy. In the message, Nancy warned Sandra not to give Carlos any money because he would waste it on alcohol and drugs, which made him aggressive and cruel. Nancy said Carlos had no intention of finding a job or overcoming his addictions, and his behavior had become increasingly threatening, making her consider leaving him. She believed it was better to end their relationship before someone got hurt. The investigation also uncovered some disturbing information about Carlos. He had been convicted of bodily harm multiple times, including brutally beating his own mother when he was 17. Although he only received probation at the time, he later served short sentences for assaulting women he lived with and had relationships with. The investigation into Carlos and Nancy's relationship revealed many red flags from the start. Carlos had a history of aggression, drug addiction, and a criminal record, which was compounded by his uncontrollable rage. Meanwhile, Nancy's friends disclosed that she was not just a housekeeper or caregiver, as she had claimed. Instead, she was providing escort services to wealthy clients in Santander, earning a substantial income. Carlos was aware of her occupation and initially accepted it, as it allowed him to avoid finding work himself. However, when Nancy became pregnant, Carlos's behavior became increasingly erratic. He grew suspicious about the child's paternity, wondering if it belonged to one of her clients. Additionally, he was consumed by jealousy, vacillating between preventing her from interacting with other men and forcing her to continue working to support them financially. Meanwhile, Carlos squandered the money he took from his mother on his own vices, leaving them struggling to make ends meet. After nearly a week of unexplained absence, Nancy and Carlos's whereabouts were unknown. Although Carlos had been in touch through messages, he never revealed his location. It wasn't until August 26th that police finally obtained a search warrant for the couple's vacant rental apartment in Santander. The discovery they made was gruesome and left no doubt that Nancy had met a tragic end. Bloodstains were found throughout the apartment, with some attempts made to clean them up, but most were still visible to the naked eye, including in the clogged bathroom and toilet drains. The police also found fragments of bones, hair, skin, and internal organs. Forensic analysis confirmed that these belonged to Nancy, even though her body was not found in the apartment. The crime scene suggested that Nancy had been brutally killed, dismembered in the bathroom, and her remains disposed of elsewhere. Carlos was quickly identified as the main suspect in the case due to evidence found in the apartment, including a package from a local hardware store with his fingerprints on it. The package was for a small hatchet, but the tool itself was not discovered. Further investigation revealed that Carlos had bought the hatchet, along with rubber gloves and large trash bags, at a nearby market on August 20th. This was confirmed by security footage from the store. An elderly vendor who sold Carlos a small cart also positively identified him from a photo. The day after the gruesome discovery in the apartment, Carlos surprisingly surrendered to a Madrid police station, attempting to shift suspicion away from himself. He claimed to be reporting Nancy missing, but was promptly arrested as the prime suspect in the heinous crime. Carlos professed his innocence, stating that he and Nancy had argued and parted ways on August 20th, after which he left town in an emotional state, unaware of any subsequent events involving Nancy. He suggested that someone might have attacked her when she returned to gather her belongings. However, Carlos's alibi seemed dubious, especially considering the police found his fingerprints on the hatchet's packaging. Despite conducting an extensive search of nearby wastelands, sewer systems, and the coastline with the help of divers, no trace of Nancy was found. To further investigate, the police tracked Carlos's movements from August 20th to 26th using his mobile phone signals, revealing that he had spent 3 days traveling along the coast and visiting Bilbao and Burgos before heading to Madrid. It was clear that Carlos was trying to conceal his activities, but it seemed unlikely that he would travel across the country with a dismembered body, leading authorities to continue their search in Santander. Street surveillance footage captured Carlos's movements on the evening of August 20th. He was seen walking towards a large forest park, but returned to his apartment late at night. He then left again, this time pushing a cart filled with unusual, oddly shaped bags. Since there were few cameras within the park, Carlos vanished from view once he entered the wooded area. Later, he re-emerged with the same cart, but it was now significantly lighter. He then proceeded towards the railway tracks, which were located near a steep cliff overgrown with bushes. After visiting this area, Carlos returned once more, but this time without the extra weight, providing law enforcement with a clear lead on where to search for the body. On September 16th, police discovered bags containing badly decomposed human remains in a heavily overgrown area on a hillside. The remains were identified as those of Nancy Gorcey, who had been dismembered into 20 parts using a hatchet. Although security camera footage showed everything Carlos had transported in a cart was recovered, one crucial item was still missing: the fetus of the 4-month pregnant Nancy. The state of the victim's genitals and lower abdomen revealed a brutal mutilation with a knife and hatchet, suggesting that the killer had removed the fetus and disposed of it separately from the mother's body. Despite mounting evidence, Carlos refused to admit his involvement, providing contradictory statements and trying to shift the blame onto an unknown attacker. However, traces of Nancy's blood were found on his clothes and shoes, which he had attempted to wash off but failed to completely remove. Through diligent investigation, authorities were able to reconstruct the sequence of tragic events and the entire scenario of the crime, ultimately incriminating Carlos. Forensic experts have reconstructed the events of August 20th. After an argument, the man brutally beat and strangled his pregnant partner, Nancy, in the kitchen, where bloodstains were later found on the floor and walls. Next, he moved Nancy's body to the bathroom, went shopping at a hardware store in the market, and then used a hatchet and large kitchen knife to dismember her body into 20 pieces. He placed the pieces in bags and loaded them into a cart. That night, he took the cart to a park, searching for secluded areas to dispose of the body parts. He followed a pre-planned route, scattering the bags in various locations, hoping they would never be found. The fate of the fetus removed from Nancy's body remains unknown. Carlos denied his guilt, claiming to have loved Nancy